And you can't even drive? I can. Are you stupid, eh? Are you a stupid fool? Well, why can't you drive then? You can't even drive! A bit grey today, isn't it?
Hello, everyone.
Goodness me.
That's the. What do you think of the new Deepest Law countdown? Unpopular Opinion's got one, so I think it's only fair that Deepest Law would get one.
It's the classic. Half of it is like jazz flute, which is brilliant, and then just some kind of like funky guitar riff reminiscent of when, like, is it Niles Rodger and David Bowie working together?
It's actually neither David Bowie nor Niles Rodger or Chic, as that band was known.
Yes.
I'm not actually I don't actually know of the act. That was the theme tune, the entrance theme for Dory Funk Jr. and Terry Funk when they were working in All Japan Wrestling in the early 80s. And
you're so proud of the niche, aren't you? You're proud of the niche.
I'm proud of the niche, but I also think that there's something uniquely funky and kind of cheesy about those themes.
And what was the little clip afterwards?
Oh, that is a clip from Lee and Herring's Fist of Fun, a mid-90s comedy show that famously I would refuse to go out or meet any friends if that was circled in the TV guide, and people would know, don't be
staying in. Yeah.
Don't bother AA on this evening because, and it was Fist of Fun was actually aired back to back with the Farce show. So it was like a block of comedy on a Thursday. It could be on a Tuesday. I think it was on a Thursday. So yes, and then famously, of course, Lee and Herring had a Sunday afternoon slot that they somehow bagged, and they had like a kind of spoof, kind of morning sofa type show called This Morning with Richard and Not Judy, which again features many of their creations, including Simon Quinlank, the king of hobbies, from who famously, of course, would drink weak lemon drink. You see, so yes, if you get deep enough into the law, you'll know the origins of many of my. I'm always postmodern. I'm always referencing something. So anyway, yeah. So today we're finishing up today on propaganda. I have set entropy up for those who want it. I'll just post that in the chat. And yes, the actor Kevin Elder. And I tell you what, it might be interesting to look back at that because they Lee and Herring had this sketch where they were always making fun of Tony B. Liar. But I think they were actually spoofing right wingers, making fun of Tony Blair. But it might be interesting to go back to see the levels of subversion in those two. But anyway, we are returning to World War II and finishing up on World War II propaganda. Now, Pharaoh, you were a little bit worried that people were getting sick of these propaganda shows, but I was having a look back through the analytics, and apart from Thomas the Tank, these are some of the top-rated deepest laws of all time.
Yeah, it's definitely true. You want to keep it fresh, but I think what's been interesting is that we've been on a bit of a journey from some of the kind of the worst kinds of propaganda in World War One to look at the difference between America, World War One, and World War Two. I thought diving into Goebbels's rules for propaganda was really interesting as well. But I think it's nice to finish up with sorry.
Do you know what was funny about that stream, right? There were comments on that stream saying, AA, what a coward! He won't show like the hardcore Nazi propaganda on his channel. I'm like, all right, yeah, when you've got a channel with 60,000 subscribers, you show hardcore Nazi propaganda and see. It's it was
Won't have one much longer.
I don't know what people's expectations are. You've got to, so I thought we treated that with delicacy and care, Pharaoh.
You can just look it up. Just literally, just Google it yourself afterwards. You're looking, it's all the same. So I think today's going to be good because one of my favourite groups from World War One was, of course, the British propaganda. There were some really good memes that came out of that. So it's interesting to see how that's changed. And we've got some a bit of Italian. And I think obviously don't agree with a lot that the Italian fascists have to offer, but they're very good in their art. Is one thing you could say.
Oh, and swank architecture, as we've explored on other episodes of Deepest Law. I quite liked a bit of the 30s Italian style.
Yes, exactly. 30s Italian. And then
it's like I always say with the fascists, right? You may not agree with their politics, but they wore swank capes.
Yeah, good cape game. And then we've got some kind of Russian translations as well. So again, I think the Russian stuff was interesting in the First World War, and that's obviously a rapid transformation between the traditional hierarchical czarist regime to egalitarian communist nonsense of the Second World War.
All right, so let me share my screen here. Here we are, and where would you like me to start? Is it upside down? Shall I start at the start here rather than with the Russians? Yeah. Can you see my screen?
Sorry, yes, I was talking to mute there. Yes, that's correct. Start at the top.
Okay. So we've got for your country's sake today, for your own sake tomorrow, and then all of these women are kind of facing the same way. Now, what do we make of it? Go to the nearest recruiting station. Oh, is this a British one?
Yeah,
Pharaoh.
Supposedly, yeah. What was interesting, I think that the British had more female groups than the Americans did.
The WAFs.
Yes, exactly. There's loads of different ones. The WAFs, the Wrens. Then there was one for the wardens as well, female wardens. So again, it's interesting how the place of the woman in World War One was always to kind of, be just thinking of their husband abroad, and now it's gone to, you have to take a direct involvement for literally for your own sake. That's what's implied by this. This is kind of like you will die, or like your family will be at risk unless you engage yourself in labour.
Okay, so all I'm looking at here is I think these are Extinction Rebellion activists in training, in waiting. That's all I see here is future.
I mean, their children certainly will go on to be that. I mean, something that struck me is how the appeal seems to be to femininity still. It isn't like sort of because there's been some things recently about women in the army, which all seem to be women just need to be men, and I suppose this is sort of headed in that way. But it is somewhat nice to see them appealing to.
I mean, you say that. Look at that jawline. Some stiff jawline she's got there.
But that is the classic English rose, though. Again, it's like a Rossetti model. There is that kind of British archetype, I think.
This is when British women were not unbearable.
So let's carry on. Don't do it, mother. Leave the children where they are. Take them back. Take them back. And there's
yeah.
Oh, look, there's the painter himself. What's going on here?
If I think this appears to be basically during the war, there were some issues with the evacuee scheme, which I'm sure you've heard of. Where the children from industrial areas and towns were sent out to the country to keep them safe from raids. But obviously, it wasn't very long before families began to clamour for their children back, and that they simply couldn't stay apart from them that long. And yeah, this is basically saying, look, if you bring your children into the city, you're helping Hitler, because he'll be able to get them there. So yeah, I think that's the impetus for this.
Yeah. Anything else to say about this, Farah?
I just quite like Ghost Hitler. I thought it was quite entertaining there, but it was a big problem actually. A lot of the Cockney families just didn't move or didn't want to move, and there was a whole load of propaganda about getting kids out to the countryside. So I think it was a real issue. I'm not sure how effective this is. Again, if you see the kind of like, you've got some very large text at the bottom, it's taking up 40%. It's quite a complicated message. I'm not sure it's that strong a poster.
No.
And the way they deal with it is kind of like, you're literally send your child back to this burning hellscape. If you can zoom in on the kind of, you've got this kind of silhouette of London in flames behind Hitler. So even the kind of imagery, I think, isn't that strong. And so it was one of the kind of weaker ones, but I thought it was interesting because it's a propaganda message you don't really see talked about that often.
I mean, I'm almost getting sort of like stay indoors, wear a mask vibes, because it's sort of like, I do think that even during a time of war, separating parents from their children, even if it's a good idea on paper, shouldn't really be an enforced policy ever. Just because of the many implications and the problems that's going to raise. So, I mean, there is quite a sinister edge to this poster, I think, at least for me.
Yeah. One thing just to say about the kind of propaganda efforts of England at this time was that obviously everything was focused on recruitment last time, and also maybe a bit of war bonds, so kind of financial and military. But now I think they realised how important propaganda is to get people to do things. So it branches out into, again, you saw there kind of mothers, households. We've got this kind of kitchen waste coming up. So this is for the home, and for, was it Ministry of Health? All of these new ministries going to spring up, and propaganda efforts multiply massively. And I think it's interesting that again, we're sort of living in the wake of all of these agencies set up during World War II, that were created. So there's a direct line of correlation between that propaganda ad and the coronavirus ad today.
You know what's interesting about that is that I have a neighbor here who is in her mid-90s, okay, and so obviously and she was one of those. I think she was one of the vaccies, during the war they had children had to be evacuated, and I think I'm not. You have to work it out, but how old would she have been in the war if she's in her 90s now? But anyway, she was part of that generation. So she's got. I mean, she can remember the war, if that makes any sense. It's in her kind of conscious memory, just like you can remember when you were 10, etc. And Mrs. AA was talking to her the other day, and mentioned the fact that there's been a very strong. It's basically impossible to ignore. Boris Johnson's government has tried to invoke a kind of wartime spirit throughout the pandemic, hasn't he?
They've tried, yeah.
They've tried, and Mrs. A mentioned this, because this neighbour of ours is one of the few people around who can make a direct comparison. So she was like, well, what do you think of that? And what are the differences? Does this feel like the same as what it was like living through the war? And she said the main difference is that back in the 40s, people would do things for each other. They would actually help each other all the time. Whereas now people are much more selfish, and even in the way that pandemic rules and things are enforced, they're not enforced in such a way that that encourages people to kind of have that community spirit and helping each other. So I just thought that was kind of interesting comment from my neighbour there. But that maybe goes to other changes that have happened in society since the 40s, not just the propaganda, right?
Yeah, just on that. During the first lockdown, I don't know. I was watching TV at the time, but they happened to have a documentary on that was about literally the Blitz and then comparing it to Corona. So there was an active effort to try and, like you say, to try and connect that Blitz spirit. It's really interesting. I'll try and dig it out because that'd actually be really funny to go through. It was the worst bit of propaganda I've ever seen in my life. It was terrible, but the problem is it's just a different scenario. Do you know what I'm saying? And there is no connection between people anymore. So
the thing is that the war. I think the war brought people together, whereas the pandemic actually has actually pushed people further apart and isolated and made them more atomized. You know, in the case of this neighbor, for example, she hasn't been able to see anyone for weeks or months, and I think she's feeling pretty lonely. Whereas back in the pre-pandemic, she had for a person who was in their 90s, had an extremely active social life, but now she doesn't see anyone, and I think she suffered for it. And I think there are a lot of people who feel cut off and isolated rather than so it's done the opposite of bring people together, hasn't it? It's isolated people more and kept them more. It's kind of accelerated the atomization.
And there's an emphasis on ratting people out, the snitching, etc. Report your neighbour for Corona, etc.
Well, yeah, there you go. It's hardly the same. And I mean, if you ever wanted proof that we shouldn't idolize kind of Spitfire nationalism, then why is it that of all things the current administration uses the Second World War still? Why hasn't that been banned? Well, it's because it's a useful tool. It tricks sort of your average Tory voter, your average sort of Brit who likes to feel a bit patriotic into doing whatever the government wants, because they can go, look, come on, it's the Blitz, it's
tomorrow's cigar stream was going to be on the kind of insidious abuses of patriotism. And we were going to look at like some different examples in history, but unfortunately that stream is going to be delayed now because I've just heard that something's come up for a young Squire Turnip, and we have to rearrange. But maybe you could jump on that one when we finally do it, Panama, to elaborate on some of these themes some more.
When did you say it was, sorry?
Well, it was meant to be tomorrow night, but I think we're going to have to push. We're going to have to push it. So who is that? So we've been talking about Daddy Pig recently. Here is a pig. We want your kitchen waste, pig food. Keep it dry, free from glass, bones, metal, paper, etc. It also feeds poultry. Your council will collect. So they wanted waste to feed the pigs, which would then be turned into spam, would it?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. One kind of great victories of English propaganda in the Second World War is definitely on this kind of health and food side of things. And some of the most well-known posters are from this area. And they had, I think, a really strong team behind it. But again, the message is super simple. If you're looking at it from afar, you can see, we want your kitchen waste at the top, and then pig food, the words. So even if you're not looking at the imagery, you're saying, okay, these guys want old kitchen waste for pigs, so it's going to help everyone out. Then you've got this kind of quite amusing pig. He's kind of humanized because he's standing up on his back legs, doing a little winky, cheeky, chappy face. He's loving life. He's got his pig food. I mean, I don't know if there's a little joke about him, his left arm hiling there.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's slightly unfortunate, isn't it?
I think he's just saying hi. I think he's just saying hello. And then there's more details underneath. So I like it. I mean,
first I would say I really like this poster. And in fact, there's somebody that lives not very far from here, a farmer who has this up on his wall. I've seen it, but and he does keep pigs. And I mean, the pig swill thing was a bit of a sort of World War II meme in Britain, because sort of what you would do is everybody would empty their kitchen waste into a bin that would be on the corner of your street. So what you'd end up with, of course, was this massive bin full of old food slurry, and it became a meme to sort of like push people into it and use it for other sort of nefarious purposes before the council came around, and that sort of thing. People would sort of get pissed up and pass out into the pig swill bin on the corner, that sort of thing.
So, just to mention my neighbour again, I believe it's her birthday coming up, and I'm strongly encouraging Mrs. A to bake a cake because you know, maybe it did strike me that she might be like thinking like, well, you know, there used to be more community, i.e., you guys should do something like neighbors should be nicer to each other. So I'm encouraging Mrs. A to make a cake. Even though I do cooking, I don't do baking. I see that as it's just not in my skill set. So, but
you can always just drop her a Charlie Bingham's.
I can drop her a Bingham's, yeah. Or I can make her a spaghetti bolognese or something. But you know,
care for a Nescafe Gold.
Mrs. AA found out that AA was going around to other women's house for
this is the problem. Like back in the you know, in normal times, you'd be able to go in and have a coffee, but now you can't you can't go in each other's properties.
Well, let's be honest, AA. You can go in each other's properties.
You can, but you know.
Yeah, come on now.
but then imagine what would happen if you did that, and something would happen, and then you'd be like,
who's going to know though? The eyes aren't everywhere yet, are they? You know, I don't think you'd be caught out as long as you were sort of, you know, you weren't doing it really in an over the top way.
All right, let's move on here. My mum, she's not so dumb.
No,
careless talk
mum.
Costs lives.
Keep mum.
Oh, sorry, keep mum. She's not so dumb. Careless talk costs lives. Is this more about beware of like the German femme fatale? She might be a spy, or this. You know.
This is well. For a start, this poster is I think one of the more famous ones. It's become a bit of an icon, and also I think. I mean, I may be wrong, but I take this to be a sort of slightly based reference to the tendency of women to have a bit of a gossip. I don't know. You know, they're sort of saying, you know, well, we've got the, you know, she's useful to the enemy because she's always talking.
Or do you remember the American one where it showed like the chain of whispers? This is kind of the same campaign, I guess, just on the British side. But
I think it's quite clever because it works either way, where the man will instantly kind of put himself as one of the officers there, speaking to the kind of beauty, and then being like, okay, yeah, she's not so dumb, maybe she is a spy. But then I do think it works the other way. If you're the woman, you know, careless talk cost lives, keep them, you know. So yeah. I think it is smart again, and then just in terms of layout as well, the men are basically kind of cut out from the image. It's just about the woman, and again, she's kind of looking directly at you. If you zoom in, so it's very eye catching. To spot someone passing by, again, that kind of shot of red in the lipstick there is a really good way of capturing that attention. The art style is also really cool. It's kind of a little bit impressionistic. There's that kind of movement to it as well. So I think this is one of my favourite posters.
Why do I get the impression that this guy on the right here would have been like an Oswald Mosley supporter? Just giving me that vibe for some reason. No?
Yeah, he does have that sort of look. As well, I mean, just I don't know if this is intentional or not, but isn't there sort of a pun with keep mum, as in, you know, mummery, you know, being quiet, you know? Do you think is that meant to be, or is it just
she's a mum as well? Yeah, like I think that's where it kind of works for the women as well. That could be like the putting her as the glamorous mother who is keeping quiet because she's not done.
So let's keep on going. Women of Britain come into the factories.
Oh no!
Yeah,
here we go.
Pretty cursed. What I think is interesting about this is this could be literally from a Soviet poster.
Yeah, highly communistic.
Yeah. So obviously, again, just the layout of it. You've got the kind of big whites come into the factories, and then obviously in orange above it for when you're a little bit closer. Again, you've got to remember that posters are read from afar and they're read up close. So it's that kind of dual reading you've got to take into account. I mean, art style wise, you know, you've got this kind of simplified graphic element to it. You've got the oranges, blacks, and whites, which again is it's kind of like natural hazard colors, like a tiger stripes or whatever. So it's really going to capture your eyes. You've got the kind of woman praising the sun there, but you know, she's looking out, and all of the aircraft are flowing through her arms, so it's almost kind of like she's firing them out like her minions from the factories, you know.
Now, I'm going to make a video on the slippery slope soon because, famously, I refuse to include slippery slope as a fallacy on foundations of logic. But also, I think that the slippery slope is not a fallacy because every single slippery slope argument has become true, right? We started this series, Pharaoh, if you remember, looking at women's lib propaganda. And it strikes me that it took less than 100 years from women's lib to reach this point. I mean, what's the time scale between those posters we were looking at in episode 1 and this?
And this poster here, I mean, this is like literally like a couple of decades. Some of them were in the 20s, so we're talking 20 years, yeah.
I mean, it really hasn't been long, has it? Now, I mean, I don't want to say this is, by design, but like, do you think this would have happened if we didn't have the suffragette movement and so on? This whole shift to push women into these sorts of roles.
They do kind of go hand in hand, really, because the wars were a very convenient point at which women now, because sort of prior to the world wars, you had sort of all the men working in their various jobs and all the women in the homes, but so there wasn't really there weren't the open spaces available for there to be just a massive switch over. Women couldn't just go and en masse get jobs in workshops or anything because they were already full. Whereas when the wars happened, and because of course that's the nature of war in this period, the war is now total. So vast numbers of men, more than ever before, are being conscripted or drafted and armed to fight. So now there's a massive number of open spaces, and the state simply looks at itself and says, well, what the hell does maintaining the traditional relationship between men and women matter when we have a war to win? So get them into the factories.
To me, there's so many dark things here. It's like, well, let's completely reinvent relations between everybody in society. Let's completely rejig everything. Let's encourage what we're seeing here for the sake of international finance, basically. That's all I'm seeing here. So
just on how planned it is. I think the reality is there is probably an ideological core that came out of the suffragette movement, placed in positions like the civil service, etc., that would push for it. But it's interestingly that it's at moments like war where, like Panama says, there's a pragmatism to this. There is a need to fuel the factories, and that's where the pragmatic centrists will side with the ideologues, basically, and then lead to change. And also how the kind of moments like war are these kind of like turbocharged moments. There's a speed.
I mean, and that's what they're trying to use the pandemic for as well. It's like all agendas that were currently on the table, you speed them up into hyper time, blow away, like basically forget about the argument. And I mean, this is one of the things I talk about on Foundations of Rhetoric, actually, Pharaoh, where you have to kind of select where you pitch your narrative. And the example I look at there, and it's actually taken straight from one of these textbooks, is climate change. But it's like, well, you can have the argument on the facts, you can have the argument on the values, or you can have the argument on what they call procedure, right? If you're able to shift the argument from facts or values to procedure, you basically bypass everything. So it's like, well, we're doing this. How are we going to get it done? That's a very different question, isn't it? From should we do it, or what's the right thing to do, or what are the facts? And that's where you can use pragmatism basically to just bypass everything. And you're seeing it being done right now with the whole debate over compulsory vaccines that are taking place. The European Court of Human Rights just basically declared, okay, it's fine. It's not against human rights to mandate vaccines. So
it's your mafia judging the mafia again. Just going back to the women and work, I would be interested to see. I wonder if they did any polling, like before around what the World War about putting women into work. Because again, this was an issue that I wonder if it was polled, most of the men would have said no to women in the work, while it was sort of just railroaded over by the government during this time. So yeah, I need to look into that.
I know. I mean, one of the very interesting things, slightly later, but if you read around the history of the National Health Service, that never had popular support before it was brought in. It was that was an entirely elite project that they used various different things to basically juggernaut through. And I don't think the polls backed up. It wasn't a bottom up thing. It was just kind of a vision of a few men in Whitehall, basically. But now look at support for the NHS. You see, and this is where the whole elite theory thing comes in. It's like, well, the public will basically support what they're told to. Eventually, give it enough time. Do it first, ask questions later, and because of people have got like a status quo bias. If you can get something in long enough, it will have like de facto public support, as the NHS does right now. So, and this is possibly what happened here. It's like, well, it doesn't even matter what the public support was for women in factories. Just do it, and then ask afterwards. Anyway, let's carry on. Your talk may kill your comrades. So this is a bit unusual.
Yeah, so I want to include this because this is by a guy called Abraham Games, and he's like one of England's kind of top propagandists during this period. And it's a very just different art style, basically. So that was just interesting.
What is it? This is the words of the person acting as a kind of spiral dagger, that's spiral sword thing that's killed all of his comrades. Very communistic talk yet again. I mean,
is it meant to be sort of like because it looks too thin in his mouth to be a sort of tongue? Is it sort of like meant to be the start? It's like a radio wave.
Yeah,
maybe
sort of
morphs into
a speech wave, which then turns into a spear. Maybe.
What was the name of this artist again?
Abram Games.
Abram Games. Interesting. Okay.
Should we just yeah?
Do you want to look him up, or
I'll just do a little wiki check. Yeah.
Let's have a look at Abram Games. I'm just interested. Like, there's a lot of like, if you were to say, "Oh, was this a Soviet poster or was it a British poster?" You wouldn't necessarily know, would you?
Interestingly, his mother was a Russian seamstress, basically. So, and they immigrated.
Sarah Rosenberg. Okay, I can see. Just checking out that little section of Wikipedia there.
But why I think Games is interesting, I did sort of reference this in the last time we chatted, but he was pivotal for the Festival of Britain, which is the kind of post-war celebration, the post-war boom. But I genuinely believe that the Festival of Britain is kind of like the global liberal sort of laying out their manifesto for Britain, basically. And he did all of the iconography and the imagery for that, but it's basically all about this international trade and scientism and stuff like that. So as like a little mini case study, it's interesting how the propagandist, this quasi-Soviet propagandist, goes on to basically help do another kind of propaganda, which is the.
I mean, he was literally Russian.
Yeah. I mean, they immigrated before, but it would be interesting to see what his political views are. I didn't know much about them, but I did know he was pivotal for the Festival of Britain. So
let's carry on. Salute the soldier. Save more. Lend more.
Finances again.
I mean, again, this is a very I don't know what they call it, like socialist realism or whatever.
Yes, Soviet realist. Yeah, it's like it's kind of like the manners icon. But I mean, I don't know if you've noticed, but we haven't had that much like manly posters. Like last time, every single one was just like a soldier lining up to do a cavalry charge, or even a cow giving its life away to feed the troops with Bovril. It's these kind of like quite heroic ideas, but this is like the best we've got is this kind of quasi-communistic, salute the soldier. Again, even that, I don't know, there's something weird about it. There is something like Soviet iconographic in terms of the soldier as, guardian of the working man or whatever.
I mean, so yeah, encouraging people to save and lend more. I mean, yeah,
more debt.
Yeah, although it does say save more, so.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, in order to lend more, you need to save more, and that principle has actually gone out of thinking at the moment. If you look at the modern monetary theory, it's just like debt, good,
debt, credit. So. Yeah, well, it will come down sooner or later.
Together. Let's have a look at some of these jolly chappies then. So we've got Canadian. We've got these characters up here.
You got the King's African Rifles. You got the Raj troops.
Yeah.
The fellow down underneath them in the pith helmet is South African.
This one? No, this one.
That one on the left with the stripe. I think that one of the two other chaps in khaki will be Australian or New Zealand, and then I think the sailor would be British.
I think the bottom one's Anzac, and then I wonder if that's another Canadian above, but a different because it's that's RAF Regiment.
Oh shit!
But what I thought was interesting about this is, again, this is kind of like the beginning of civic nationalism. Do you know what I'm saying? It's all nations, all races under one.
Well,
it's kind
of also a kind of start of what we've talked about as boomer truth, but the idea of the multicultural society is, it's in this poster, isn't it? It's like, I mean, there's a few too many white faces, I suppose, for 2021 standards, but it's getting there, isn't it?
But
I mean, it's of an ideology.
It's the same ideology and the same imagery as well, but like you said, it's just a slightly different cast of people.
I mean, nowadays it's very hard to view this poster without anything but sort of pessimism, I suppose, for what it would lead to. But I mean, I suppose in its context, it is a very effective one because it reminds the people of Britain of the size of their enterprise, if you see what I mean. It's sort of like, look, we're going to call on, most of the known world to come and fight. Although obviously, what they were fighting for is, a bit unfortunate, perhaps, but
kind of effective. I mean, I think it is kind of effective propaganda, though, because in a wartime scenario, it's nice to know you've got allies and all people like coming together. And probably did, if you were there in 1941 and a young schoolboy or something looking at that, you'd probably feel a bit safer, wouldn't you?
You probably would, yeah. Just as opposed to just objectively, I think it works. But yeah, it's just how pretty much the second the war was over, this narrative ceased to exist, and then by 1948 you had the Empire Immigration Act. So
yeah, and then by 2015 there's a statue of Queen Elizabeth commemorating all of the losses of the crown, which I had documented before. If anybody's seen that video, that was and the Communist Manifesto for some reason. So
pivotal in British, yeah. So these are quite interesting. So this is a series done by a guy called Fugas, who is a kind of cartoonist, and he does these kind of Giles-esque little mini cartoons. But I put a few in there. And I thought they're quite charming.
What's actually going on here? I mean, I can see the painter there, but why is he in those garbs? What's the idea here? Is he's spying in the painting, or
can you zoom in? I don't know if you can read the text. Read the small text first.
Strictly between these four walls,
and there
he is in the painting.
Yeah, that's right. So this is all about. So you see, the careless talk cost lives. Again, that's the kind of slogan they want you to remember, which again is a great timeless classic. and then as you kind of read the cartoon more closely, it's just a casual conversation between two friends. But the painter is disguised; he's hidden. He's always listening in.
Yes. Yeah, not bad. Bit clever, maybe, for Joe Schmo, but quite
I
good.
don't know. Also, is that meant to be the portrait of sort of Horace Walpole? That's the vibe I think I get from that. It has.
That's a good notice if it is. Yeah, I don't know.
I like it. It to be fair, it seems like less of a poster and more of a sort of like, I don't know, pamphlet or cigarette card, that sort of thing.
I think they had them in the newspapers. Basically, it wasn't like it was like a poster on the wall or whatever. So
right, yeah.
Here's another one.
Oh God.
Do you know what I've just realised here?
Go on.
Maybe John D would like this wallpaper because the painter has got a carrot for a nose. Look, carrot pilled.
It's a bit carroty.
It's a very carrot-esque wallpaper. So this could be all the rage among a certain crowd because you could have this as your. So there he is. He's in the walls. Don't forget that the walls have ears. There they all are. Look.
I very much like this whole style. I think possibly because I had a lot of books as a kid that were illustrated in a very similar manner to this. In fact, AA, this reminds me slightly of the Roger Hargreaves Mr. Men style of illustration.
Yeah, a little bit. A little bit. The art style's quite nice. I'm just checking out what they've got in their little afternoon tea here. Obviously there's tea and
on the floor, which is quite strange.
Is that cheese that they've got, or is that cake?
It's probably a seed cake, or fruit cake.
Okay. What's that then up the top? Is that sandwiches or
little rolls?
Yeah. It's a weak selection. Weak selection.
It is a weak selection. Although to be fair, Pharaoh, it was the war. They were rationing. It was very difficult to get a good cream tea in the war.
Yeah, good point about that not being on the table though. But I think it would mess up the.
Yeah, they wouldn't be able to lead in this place.
Yeah.
Okay.
But no, I like it because this is kind of conditioning people. This is all about just reminding you in circumstances. And they were like, when do people chat? It's going to be during these moments.
Can somebody please Photoshop this somehow to make like a wallpaper that I can send to Mr. D? I think he might appreciate the carrot. You could color each of those orange, and it could be lovely carrot wallpaper for his cadre of strange Robinson Crusoe figures.
Also, phrenologically, AA, what do you think of the woman on the left there? Trustworthy?
Yeah, I mean, I've been checking out their noses, and I'm not sure what to make of a nose that's just a kind of line like this. I mean, it's a very odd.
What about that forehead, though?
Yeah, with a very, very receding hairline.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that's probably the head shape of an imbecile, according to the phrenology. Dishonest chin, of course. All right, shall we move on?
All right.
I like the fact that she's got like ace mid-century modern furniture, whereas she's just got like a basic chair. I'd much rather be sitting in this chair. Anyway, let's carry on.
Oh, bloody hell. All right, Pharaoh.
Yes.
Subversion.
Oh, dear. Take the carrot pill, chaps. Take the carrot pill.
Somebody needs to send this to D as well, and this can be D now, Dr. Carrot.
I don't know about the children's best friend there. No.
He looks cheeky.
He's a bit creepy, isn't he? Would you really want somebody with this gait coming to see your children? I don't trust a man with a mincing gait in that manner.
He does look a bit odd, doesn't he? I mean, AA, do you know the thing about that carrots supposedly improve your eyesight?
Yeah.
Well, that's actually a myth that comes from the war.
Really?
Because and this is quite a strange reason, but I think people can back me up on this. I think it's that when the Brits cracked, they cracked one of the German. No, they'd found out how to install radar in their aircraft towards the end of the war, so that they could work out literally where enemy planes were within minutes of being able to fight them. And the Germans obviously were flummoxed by this. They couldn't work out how things had improved, and so the official British statement in its own press was that the reason their pilots were now doing so much better against the Germans was that they were eating carrots, and the vitamin A in the carrots giving them good eyesight, so they could fight at night. And so, hence the idea that carrots boost your eyesight.
Well, that's one of those things that I bought into hook, line, and sinker, especially when I was a kid, and I was convinced I could see in the dark because I
got your carrots. See, wartime propaganda working its ways on you.
This has to become the new face of John Dee, though, doesn't it? Are you going to trust your young men with this man? With this dog carrot?
My biggest concern is, how does he put his top hat on? Because his arms are too short for his head.
It's very stubby. Well, this is the thing. It's untrustworthy. There's too many little discrepancies.
So let's carry on. Keep mum. She's not so dumb. Here's another part of this.
I think I looked up this line of posters. Essentially it's keep mum as in keep quiet. That's the meaning. It's mum as in the term for shut up.
This is less good than the other one. I think you just got kind of. He just looks like quite a hen-picked man. Can we get a zoom in on that face?
Well, she's going. Please tell me more army secrets. Yeah.
This is Samson and Delilah right there.
Yeah.
Kind of reminds me a little bit of that Noel Coward played Blythe Spirit for some reason. Just the look on this man's face. So let's carry on. Dig for victory. This is a famous one, isn't it?
Yeah, this is an all-time classic. I mean, just in terms of the text, it's kind of interesting because they chose not to center it. So you can see the dig is on the D for digs on the left, the victory is on the Y, so it gives it a slightly angular, I don't know, maybe a bit more kind of velocity and action going on. But again, the idea of dig for victory is a great slogan. It's connecting your gardening work with, these guys are literally planting carrots. They've taken the carrot pill. They're getting that sweet vitamin A, and they're winning the war. Quite frankly, I think a lot of people in Second World War were taking the carrot pill at that time. But interestingly, they used a photo, which I thought was quite. I think this is one of the few times there was. I don't know if you remember back to the grinding of the seed corn, that children's working poster at the very first episode we did. Also used photography, but. Again, I thought this is quite effective, where you've got an angle looking up. You can see all of the soil, you can see the foot coming down, and then it's the sky. So you've kind of got the inspiration of your outdoors. But again, the foot means that it doesn't necessarily look male or female. It could be either. So it's got that kind of everyman appeal to it. And I think there's strength in the kind of digging. Something to be proud of. So this is definitely one of my all-time favorites.
I like this very much. In fact, I would say that of the British wartime propaganda, this is the one I sort of would still hold out and go, what, this is actually pretty good. We should probably all be doing this. I mean, take the carrot pill, and if you have a bit of a little patch somewhere, grow your own veg. It's very, very rewarding. Dig for victory. And also, I think the poster is very effective too. Three words, nice colors, and it gets the message across with the sort of boot on the spade.
Is this whole stream a cunning and subversive attempt by Dee to use this stream as pro-carrot propaganda? Is this what's happened here? Is he
as if Dee and Ferro were on such good terms?
He's my mortal enemy.
I sniff the dark hand of Dee here, and and he just leaked that story that there were backstage tensions between U2 Pharaoh as a means of concealing his own subversion, as a kind of containing me sniffing this out. But clearly these have been handpicked by the Carrot Gang, I can tell. Let's carry on. Okay. Oh, look at this one.
Oh, wow.
That's interesting. It kind of reminds me of Stranger Things or something like that, you know.
Yeah, I think this is a cartoon, so it's not a real poster again. This was tweeted out by, I want to apologise, some guy, I can't remember your name, on Twitter, and I quite liked it, so I added it in the mix. But, I think this is pertinent around the Battle of Britain. You've got this horrific, monstrous creature, kind of almost something Lovecraftian, man fused with machine. He's got, again, he's almost demonic with his demon wings turned into Luftwaffe plane wings, the kind of gas mask fused to his face, and then can you see that kind of hand on the right-hand side or leg or something? It's kind of twisted and malformed, and he's also in the dark. He's this figure of, you can see all the kind of smoke and destruction behind him. He's this icon of destruction, and he's got his hand directly on the centre of London. But who is going to defeat him? It's this plucky little Spitfire. Can we get a zoom in? I think it's, what does it say on it?
Sorry to be an autist, but I think it's a hurricane or some sort of blend of the two.
It says freedom on it. It says freedom on it.
Freedom. There we go. So yeah, the anonymous plane, I'm sure someone in chat can clarify. Bringing us close to victory. Yeah, but I thought it's really, really, really cool.
I mean, I like, just as again, just, without bringing in what we think about the causes and the methods and the the things around the war. I think objectively this is a very effective piece of artwork, I suppose, rather than a poster. It's, you got this sort of horrible, tangibly German but still sort of horrible creature. And I mean, I think that the thing that makes it is that he's kind of literally, his one hand isn't just like sort of on top of something. It's literally creating rubble and death as it just sort of pours on the ground, and the fact that he's fused to those aircraft wings. And if you imagine you're just some sort of Brit and your town is being bombed every single night, this is going to hit you pretty hard, isn't it? This is going to resonate with you. I mean, look, the RAF pilot even has literally a little halo around his head.
Yeah, great spot.
He has the mark of the saints.
Yeah, and looks a bit like a Dark Souls boss, I would say as well.
It does. Maybe Dark Souls got the idea from him. Yeah, so I think that's it for England. But basically, yeah, my summary is I think they do have some quite good stuff still, but it's mainly in the, like I said, the food and the health sector. But literally, there was virtually no good poster there from like the recruitment side. They were all absolutely terrible. So it's just interesting how like much it's changed from World War One. I think they must have lost a lot of good talent and a lot of good direction in terms of what are the messages we're trying to get out there. Because again, it's sort of been taken over. It's a lot much more similar to the American propaganda now. Because again, they had their own identity in World War One. World War One England was very different to that kind of egalitarian, civic, here's liberty, etc. It's about heroism and knights and all that kind of stuff. While this is just any other generic liberal democracy.
Mm. I kind of feel like the relative merits of the propaganda of Britain and America switched around between World War One and Two. I feel like the Americans had a stronger effort in World War Two, and Britain a stronger effort in World War One. Do you agree with that?
I mean, I do think that there's some. You have to take some room for sort of what the goals of propaganda was. I mean,
Hold on.
That's all right. I'll keep going. I mean, regardless of what we think about whether or not Britain should have been in the war, the fact that they were brought into the war at a time when they didn't have the material to actually wage it meant that they had to kind of run a backhanded effort. Make sure to put your food scraps in the swill bin on the corner so that the pigs can get some meat and we can continue to literally feed ourselves. The Americans would never have had a poster that was so kind of small scale. They would have had buy Liberty Bonds or something like that.
Yeah. Again, I guess all the messaging is around recycling and trying to get the most out of the limited resources. So that's a really good point. A lot of the messaging is already predetermined by the state of the countries. But and I think because of that as well, there was a lot more of that kind of heroic nature. If you remember the kind of buy your steel for their guns or whatever, and it was the kind of 2 Tommy gun armed paratroopers firing and stuff. There's been none of that at all. So, but I do wonder whether World War One had a mental effect on these guys as well. Do you know what I'm saying? That they're sort of jaded about the kind of heroism of the war.
They were. And of course, the thing is that many of the establishment at the time had fought in it as well. So there was a kind of common understanding between the elites and the populace that, World War One had very much changed things. They couldn't just put out the same sort of things. It had to be a very different message, which I think is why they were particularly... It was convenient, so to speak, if to have a sort of narrative of, look, everything's on the back foot now. Everything is, this is a really hard upset situation. You have to plant your own veg. You have to do everything you can. It's that sort of thing. I think circumvented the problems of the lack of the sort of heroic myth in Britain at the time.
All right, shall we move on?
Yes. So with these Italian ones, so basically this is that they're all by one designer, by a guy called Gino Boccasile, and he is one of the kind of more famous Italian artists at this time. And I just chose his works because they are really outstanding and have a really good art style, but also are pretty cleverly made posters. So this one is obviously kind of showing the kind of 3 major powers of the Axis. You've got kind of fascist Italy, Nazi Germany, and Japan all working together, and then you can see they're trampling the flags of the Allied nations, and then vincere is literally like victory, basically, and you can
overcome
defeat. Yeah, and you've got that's the statue of Nike at the background, and obviously Nike is the goddess of victory. I believe there was a statue of Nike held up in Rome, and whenever that statue was supposedly said that so long as the statue was up, Rome would be victorious. And she's sort of emerging with this kind of in this golden light through the fog of war, basically. So I thought it was a really dynamic and interesting poster.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I mean the way, especially she's clearing a path between the smoke and the confusion, which I think ties into a theme in Italian propaganda, because of course they really were on the back foot from the start. From the very early days, they were losing ground, and I noticed that the Italian propaganda begins to sort of say, let's avenge our losses. Let's take back what we've lost, which is quite bold, but I think it did work. And there is a hint of that here. This idea that things are not clear cut or clean. There's chaos, there's death, there's destruction everywhere. There's smoke, but we still have our the hope of our history and our icons and an ability to fight on.
Just two other interesting things about this is that firstly, I think the Axis had a bit of a tough time because you're trying to kind of create a coalition across quite disparate groups. Italy and Germany historically not the best of friends necessarily, but obviously with Japan, it when you're talking about the ideas of ideal humanity and stuff, I'm sure those very same people would not consider Asians to be top of the list or whatever. So it's interesting how they're trying to kind of elevate Japan's position as kind of the kind of cultured, that everyone else is rubbish but they're okay kind of thing. So it's a tough thing. And also the kind of reliance on classical iconography as well. So again, the idea of Nike, would have been known to Romans, but it's not necessarily a Christian icon, is it? It's a pagan classical.
Mm-hmm. And of course, Farah, you mentioned that it was quite hard to get these nations to come together. I mean, let's not forget that prior to about 1939, the educated opinion was that there would be a war between the Italians and Hitler, because they were on such bad terms in terms of the things that had happened with Ethiopia, where Hitler had supported the Ethiopians, Austria, where Hitler had annexed Austria when without giving Mussolini any of it, when one of his big things was to try and get back old Italian claims there. The Axis alliance is kind of a very much a marriage of convenience.
Okay, so let's move on. And I just been a bit quiet there because I'm having to deal with some issue in chat here. I will say it doesn't matter which side you come from. If you incessantly post in the live chat about a certain topic, you're going to end up getting, on the ban list. So I'll just say it again. I've loosened some of the restrictions there, but if I see you talking about that one thing over and over again, it doesn't matter who you are, I will block you. Okay, so please.
There are not many mods around.
There are mods around, but you know what I'm talking about. It doesn't matter which way around it is. It's just I am sick of seeing incessant talk about that one issue. Okay, so let's carry on. So what is going on here? This is like an American gangster with a Tommy gun.
Yes, if you see me at the text at the bottom, it basically reads, I got a rough translation on Google Translate as, crimes against humanity by the gangster pilots of America against the civil populace or something like that. So I think what happened is that some American bombers had accidentally bombed some civilian locations, and so you can see the kind of bomber in the background, but the Americans here are being represented by the gangster. So again, what I thought was interesting was obviously movies were very big by then, and gangster films were very, very popular. So this idea as the American represented as this kind of callous, cigar smoking, Tommy gun wielding child killer was quite interesting. Although it's a bit weird because I thought most of the gangsters were Italian anyway. So
it was a bit rich of the Italians to. It's a bit rich, isn't it?
I mean, that would be interesting. What was the Italian opinion of the sort of Italian stereotype mafia sort of in America? Although, was this slightly before that was a big trope, or am I wrong about that?
Am I correct in thinking? That the fascists, the Mussolini's base support was from the north, just like Salvini's is, and that most of the gangsters are from Sicily in the south?
Well, I believe, again, I may be wrong about this, but I believe that the mafia tradition of never ever speaking to the police, never even having anything to do with them, you never ever speak against the family, that comes from the fascist era, where a lot of these Sicilian families were, they just realized that they couldn't cooperate with the state at all. The state was not on their side, so they just sort of retreated inwards. I believe.
So let's carry on.
In fact, I believe the mafia may have been very anti-Mussolini and very pro-American, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, it sounds about right, doesn't it? Sounds about right. So this could also be a dig at, the southern Italian mafioso forces.
Perhaps.
I mean, there are some sort. I don't want to get too much into this, but there is that kind of odd way of looking at history through what. Hold on a second. You guys talk a second. I'm gonna go.
All right.
Shout.
All right. Farah, I was going to ask, what did you actually think of that last one as a sort of piece of artwork?
Yeah, well, I think we haven't seen that many kind of posters focusing on the atrocity side of things
No.
again. So again, I thought it was interesting because there were so many in the First World War, especially around Belgium, for example.
Stop this mad brute. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But I wonder it's because Italian had probably, like you said, they'd lost, they've been hit pretty hard, so it's quite handy to go down that kind of route and say, you've been affected really, really badly, and there will be civilian casualties, and bringing that up.
So I channeled my inner daddy pig and kept my calm. What had happened is AAA had found Mrs. AA's Lindt chocolate Easter bunny.
Uh-oh.
And had started nuzzling into it, and then was unhappy when it was taken from her. So,
Oh no.
Anyway, let's. I was about to say, in that whole conspiratorial way of looking at history through secret societies and all of that, the mafia crop up more than you'd expect as a secret society, and as being like plugged into various like Masonic networks and so on. So if you did want to take that line of history, like in that version of history, not that I know that much about it, I'm led to believe that the Allied forces and like this side of things were on the same team. If that makes any sense. So it would kind of be like that. This poster would play into that conspiracy theory, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Anyway, let's carry on.
So what we're greeted here is, I think this is it the 25th of July or something? I think it's kind of referencing an attack on Italy, but I think this is Pallas Athene, or I'm trying to think what the Roman name would be. Anyway, a representation, or it could be a representation of Rome. It's Rome herself. So this kind of epic Greek goddess, and of course she's holding the fasces, which is the bundles of sticks tied together, holding the axe, which was carried by the lictors behind the consul of the senators, and it's the symbol of fascism as well. Fascist Italy kind of looks to classicism quite well. So I think this is kind of commemorating an attack on Italy, and I think those two characters are meant to represent Eisenhower and someone else, but again, I'm not sure about my American commanders.
He's a bit low IQ looking in this chap, isn't he? Is this Eisenhower?
Yeah.
Is it?
I think it's Eisenhower. It looks like Eisenhower. I mean, the one on the other side, I don't know. Is it? It's not Patton, is it? Possibly.
Yeah. Patton. I don't know. I don't think Patton had that big.
No,
big
he didn't have that
did he?
moustache. I don't know.
Somebody would have to tell us about their World War II. World War II generals. Let's carry on.
But yeah, I thought it was just interesting because again, it's kind of like this is kind of like they are under fire. They've been hit, but it means nothing to us. You've just struck the power of the fasces, and it's nothing. You're a diminutive dwarf compared to the power of Rome. I just love how Amazonianly tall the goddess is.
Yes, I mean, I also quite like the Italians are very good at invoking that ancient sense of what I would call martial femininity, in that it's not literally saying, well, the women have to go and fight or anything in a sort of modern subvertive sense. It's just that this idea that the land you're fighting for is personified by the woman that you must protect. It's a very sort of basic male urge. I think it's good at getting people to fight. Is protect, just as you would protect your wife, protect your mother, protect your sort of children. You would also protect the country. Montgomery's
a good shout, but there is an alternative take doing the rounds in the thing, which is that this is actually an anti-fascist poster, and that this is Mussolini himself, because Mussolini famously had that propaganda shot of himself doing. I always thought it was hilarious. Have you ever seen that propaganda footage? He kind of takes like one swing of a pickaxe to show that he's a friend of the working man, and then swiftly stops doing it.
Well, in fact, I remember in the original Dictator Top Trump stream, you mentioned this, the sort of politician photo op where he arrives, puts a spade in the ground, then leaves. And I mean, I think now that people mention it, I mean, the hat on the one character does look kind of more Axis than Allied, so that may be it actually.
I mean, the only thing I would say that these are all Gino posters, and I mean, I've chosen the non-offensive works of his, and he seems quite fascist. So I would be surprised if this
Probably
was.
not. Yeah.
I'll just show you for the sake of why there is some reason to believe that could be Mussolini is because of this photo opportunities like this. Like there's Mussolini with and I've seen I've actually seen video footage. There's one where he takes his top off, so he's kind of like in a vest and he's kind of puffing himself up, and he just does a bit of road work, and then swiftly he's just like, yeah, there you go, El Duce can be a working man as well. Yeah.
Well, I mean, without wanting to be, actually no, I don't. Was he? Because I know he came from fairly humble origins. So I mean, I don't know. It's possible that it's less fake than it looks. He may have had pretty good experience with manual labor. I'm not sure.
I've got weird memories of like David Cameron doing this sort of thing.
He used to go running, didn't he?
That was his thing. I don't know. I feel like I remember. Anyway, if they're still watching, that faction of fellows who keep on talking about that one topic, you should be able to post again, but please cease and desist with your nonsense. I'm in two minds about whether, I mean, you're saying this artist was fascist, but he's looking pretty Mussolini-like to me. But I mean, certainly if you have a look at it
could be,
at the phrenology, that is a low IQ head, though. I mean, look at the. I mean,
he is meant to look thuggish, isn't he? But I just love the statue of the woman, and he's done the perspective really well to give that sense of you're at the bottom of the statue. There's a tapering in of the picture. But hey, can I just ask you to check private chat a second? Our good friend Owain has come up with a little riff on the carrot meme.
Okay, yeah, I'll share that. It's amazing. There's Owain's. There's Dee's avatar.
That's fantastic.
That's a fantastic piece of work.
Wonderful.
Dee has to use that on the next you won't. That's incredible. So there we go. I like the man. Look, there he is. There's Dee sneaking in with talking to
carrots.
Talking to all the squires in the chat. Okay, yeah. So
also, just to check, that 25th of July that it says in the poster. Sorry to just change back topic suddenly. It says 25th. Is it Luglio?
Yeah.
So Luglio. I mean, that was the date that Mussolini was dismissed, I believe, by the king. That was in 1943. So again, I'm kind of confused as to what this actually is. Which side this is meant to be taking, whether it's pro or anti Mussolini.
I mean, is there a chance that this artist switched sides? Like he was previously fascist, but then it's like by 42 he'd like, oh, maybe Mussolini was not a great man, and he turned on him.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'll need to find out.
It's possible he was more of a monarchist than a fascist.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's carry on. Oh my god!
Bloody hell!
Oh my god! Is this again from the D archives? Bloody hell! What the hell?
This is kind of like a national sports poster, but again, it's kind of interesting. So you can see here, this is the kind of the graphic sports, kind of graphic art style sports guy. Once again, he's holding the fasces in his hand. Can you see that his shadow is sort of giving the silhouette of the Duce? And then in the background, you've got this kind of classical Roman discus thrower. So, it's I don't know if it's the full, I think it's just a national sports meet. But again, just kind of like, this is the Italian man. He's strong like the Romans of the past. He's trying to have the same kind of silhouette as Mussolini.
average deepest law viewer there. Just saying.
Okay, so I mean, is it just me, or is this not intensely homoerotic?
Not for the time, I don't think. Although, I mean, the thing is, you have to remember this is Italian, and they love a bit of machismo, even if it leads into a bit of homoeroticism. They absolutely adore this. So, this is very Italian.
This is something I found, though, because when I was checking out some of the mid-century Germans' propaganda movies, when I was researching propaganda for this stream and other purposes, I did notice that there's an incredibly strong emphasis on male bonding that seems to always teeter on the edge of just outright kind of homoeroticism. There's a lot of kind of buff guys hugging each other and this sort of stuff, and the emphasis on athleticism, and even today, when you look at the kind of modern day equivalents of these guys, I mean, have you ever been on like Bronze Age perverts, or somebody like who's that kind of vaguely fashy bodybuilder type, what's his name? The Golden One. You ever watch a Golden One video? It's all a little bit, I mean, I'll just give you an idea, right? I'll just show you the Twitter feed of Bronze Age pervert, who I would say tries to embody the same sorts of values and spirit that the Italian fascists did. I mean, look at, I mean, it's all very, I mean, if you didn't know better, this could easily double up. I mean, this could easily double up as a. Do you understand what I'm saying here? I mean, it's a bit like. You say he's both Plato and Nietzsche would have supported Mussolini enthusiastically and joined his movement of spiritual reawakening. So I mean, I don't know. Like, what's all that about? Why is there so much?
I think honestly, it's just it's a form of masculinity that's very just self-unaware, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's always encourage men to sort of stay fit and look in good nick. But I mean, yeah, when it's done like that, you're right. There is a very homoerotic subtext to it.
Okay, so
or maybe we're just too modernistic.
So, but you can see it's the same aesthetic though that he's obviously tapped into this way of seeing things, and I just wonder, anyway, let's carry on. Here's another one.
Oh my god.
We talked about the dehumanization of the Japanese last time. I managed to finally find the dehumanization of the British right here. This
there he is.
Bottom right. If we get
the eternal Anglo, the Brit bomb, in all his hideous glory. There he is.
Okay, so that is
could be you and me there.
This guy here is African. Is like an African.
Yes, yeah. I think he's meant to be representing American, and he's meant to be American.
He's meant to be an American troop, and this is meant to be like the Tommy, with kind of bad teeth. And...
we need to find the origin point of the bad teeth thing around Brits. We need to work out where it comes from, and because I didn't realize it was going this early on. In fact, I think I said on a different one of these streams, where there was sort of an anti-British cartoon and. They had teeth like that.
Yeah, I didn't actually get the translation for the text, so if anyone in chat can do it, that'd be great. But I always saw it as kind of like, look at the allies here. You've got this, zoom in. Can we zoom in on the African American?
I would actually just say quickly, I don't know if it's meant to be an American or a colonial troop. It may be an Abyssinian or King's African.
Was this? maybe a holdover for Mussolini's Abyssinian famous fleet.
Yeah. It's. I think this may have been just after. If there's a date, we'll know. But I think it's just after the Brits and the British Empire colonial forces took over Italian East Africa in 1941.
Yeah, but what I thought was like if you can see, his stomach's exposed, so kind of implying that he's either fat or his jacket's not.
He's just a mess.
Well. Yeah, he's obviously got
Yeah.
bottles, so he's drunk. They're both kind of their kind of outfits aren't done up correctly. They're just having a laugh, lying down. Obviously, there's something skeletal about the Brit as well. And then compared to, as we zoom up, the imperial Italian above, what would Caesar think about these invaders? So I think it's that kind of juxtaposition of fat, lazy, ugly allies versus the noble Italian.
No, I do think though, now that we can go back up here and, having had a look at some of the sorts of pictures that Bronze Age pervert posts and the general aesthetic of it, I just wonder about whether for us now in 2021, the postmodern man cannot help but have a cringe reflex about something that is so just kind of unashamedly, unabashedly kind of heroic. This is who I am, and I just stand here like a god. And it's just like, it may just be because we live in the ashes that we cannot process that without feeling a bit cringy about it.
Possibly.
So does that mean it's doomed to be? I mean, imagine now there was a popular movement based in and around this sort of aesthetic. How would you overcome the cringe reflex that fallen Gen Xer like me would have?
Well, I mean, it's possible that you're just lost. For a start. Secondly, I think that it's less to do with the actual icons themselves and more to do with the manner they're presented. Like how the kind of what would you call it? Like neon fash wave return sort of aesthetics have become just a meme for being too over the top. It's like you just have to avoid falling into certain traps. You have to just present things in a way that is more clear cut. I mean, yeah, that would be my answer. I can't give you a specific example, but I think there are ways around that.
I mean, it would be interesting to analyze though. What are the origins of that cringe reflex? Why do
What you would call by media
heroic images make us cringe in that way?
Well, I mean, sorry, Farrah.
For me, I don't cringe over that, but maybe. I think there is an interesting difference in generations. We've talked about the generation divide before, but I think something like heroism, it is easy to kind of cross a line into, being a parody of what it is to be a hero, and I think that is quite cringy. But in my mind, something like the kind of noble Caesar here is something to look up to and something to aspire towards, and I don't necessarily cringe at it at all. Maybe it's people today trying to do things.
Let me just remind you once again.
Let's see it.
You think this is just like?
I know, but but this difference to Caesar. I think Bap is definitely he's more focused on the aesthetics. I think rather than the heroism.
This looks like
are all heroes these super buff guys. I'm not sure about that.
No, and I mean,
Octavian was like a skinny neat, basically.
Yeah, I mean, also the thing is, that Mussolini had a real obsession with trying to hark back to the Roman Imperium, and he wanted to kind of give the impression that that's what his troops were fighting for this kind of new Rome. But of course, however he wanted to put it, he was just not up to that task, and neither was the Italy of that time. So I mean, hence why you get masses of Italian troops putting their hands up before they've even had it, they're not interested in a fight for this at all. So I mean, I suppose if we're going to look at this as propaganda, might we say that it wasn't really doing its job? if the morale of the actual men on the front was so low. That might be something to consider.
I mean, again, you don't cringe when you. I mean, this is the golden one. I mean, what is this like? There's something about this that seems a bit odd to me.
There is something just a bit absurd about that. I mean,
I think it's because he's presenting himself as the hero, though. I think a lot of good heroism is like, again, looking at the past, looking at those idealized figures from the past, and then real heroism is achieving something in one's lifetime. Really, it's not about necessarily aesthetics alone, isn't it? Heroism is active will, isn't it? And we just have so few men of active will right now. We're very not used to it.
Also, I would say that there's it's worth, if we're going to bring up this question of sort of like that style of male aesthetics, I think that there's something to be said that it only really works if you're, as Farah mentioned, you have to be doing something active. I think, spending just all your time sculpting and worrying about little tiny bits of yourself in the gym to get a certain look is not really that masculine. Can you compare to, say, like, being out there and doing a load of manual labor and thus looking like that because you're actually working at something, other than just your own aesthetics?
Yeah, I mean, it's possible that there's part of it, the posing the element, just may be a bit kind of vain and feminine.
That's what it is. I mean, that's what makes me cringe. It's not the look of the men themselves. It's the fact that they're being, as you say, sort of self-obsessed and quite feminine, in how they're looking at themselves, really, which isn't how you ought to be. Really, provided that you like are in good condition, then I think it's more masculine to be more concerned about the tasks in front of you and the work you have to do than specifically, looking like an Instagram model or whatever. I
mean, there's some more golden one if you want. I'll just share my screen. More golden one action. There he is. Here, look.
It is making me ask the question. I think this is an interesting point. It's like, who is the most heroic person of our age? And I just can't think of anyone at all. Like, I was thinking Farage until he started doing cameos.
No, never Farage. If you don't get to the status he had without being part of the elite. He's just another sweaty trader. He's not.
I mean, Putin.
Yeah, I think he's the closest. He's the closest thing we have, I think.
Yeah, possibly.
Famously, I mean, Putin on horse.
Yeah, see, Putin on horse. That's not cringe at all. Do you know what I'm saying? That's.
I would just.
Cool.
I had a glance at chat. Somebody put Assad.
I mean, what do we think about Putin on his horse?
You see, this is just pure Chad right there. Do you know what I'm saying? He's not even trying. I think that's the difference between him and someone like the Golden One. Golden One is just like, I know, doing those poses. This is just pure masculinity right there.
You see, I don't get the cringe reflex looking at Putin on his horse.
No, I mean, there's sort of an. I mean, even if it is staged, it looks very authentic. I don't know if it is or isn't. That's what I'm saying.
What about?
There is something Chad about it, though.
Pre-hole, so that pre-hole.
I don't think anybody else uses your pre-hole.
Hold on, man with his gun.
See,
I mean, is that not masculine there with Saddam?
I just realised he's wearing
that one. That was the famous one.
Yeah, that's great. Is he wearing a trilby, like as in?
Yeah, he was
the atheist meme there.
He was a bit of a dandy, Saddam. In fact,
he is shooting his gun.
I have a friend who's met the tailor that used to make some of Saddam's clothes. He used to buy them from various European tailoring firms and clothes shops. He was very into it. And also, I mean, it's not the most traditional image of heroism, and I'm not saying I feel any way about him in particular, but he did basically take on the entire Western alliance, single-handedly, and it went horribly, but there is something quite sort of quixotic about that, that's sort of heroic and quite masculine in a way.
You're asking for heroes. I remember back. Do you remember the Olympic opening ceremony in 2012?
The horrible one.
In England, yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember that whole thing with David Beckham on the boat? Now, Beckham is the person who's held up as the.
Oh, no.
I mean, I'll just share it for those who can't remember.
That's the first part was brilliant because, like, again, the captains of industry are heroic. Oh yes, at the beginning, yes.
Remember Beckham sped in on this boat.
Cringe.
And he kind of drove. He piloted the boat for the lighting of the torch, and he was very much held up as at that moment as a kind of national hero. Now, does Beckham not embody certain? I mean, it's a genuine question because you asked who are the heroes of now, and I'm thinking, well, Beckham is put in that role, but what stops Beckham being like a genuine hero in your book? What would stop him? Because he looks after himself. He
has no will outside of football. He's just a tool of international.
There he is, Beckham with Bojo. Look,
but heroic does he's masculine. Oh, yeah, almost. he's masculine, but I wouldn't really say he's heroic.
No, that's true.
Yeah.
Because again, what does he do? He just plays football well.
Yeah, and even then he's a bit preened.
A true hero would be athletic and be good at sports, but then also actually do a whole lot of other stuff as well.
What about Daniel Craig Bond? Because that was another element of that ceremony. Because didn't Bond parachute from the Queen's kind of helicopter or something during that whole thing?
I mean, this is an unpopular opinion, but I still think that Bond is kind of like I don't know, like a liberal hero, isn't he? Really, like
he literally fights. He literally fights for globo homo. Essentially,
you got to remember, like he's Ruber's number one hero, so that shows you everything.
Yeah, there you go.
About his character.
This was a classic Bowden talking point that the impulses that are called fascistic or heroic or whatever are transmuted to work for the side of globo homo, so that the fascist, quote unquote, it's all right to be one of those as long as you're fighting for the forces of POS. So Batman is the banner example. Like Batman is basically a fascist in all ways, and in fact so much so that it's a standard left-wing talking point. Left-wingers don't like Batman because they think he's a fascist. I remember when Batman versus Superman came out, and the media was full of this is a fascist film. So I mean, and you could say, well, Bond in the same way is kind of a fascist, right? He takes no prisoners. I mean, unlike Batman, he's prepared to kill, shags any woman he wants. He's sexist, but all of that's all right because he's kind of working for us. And I mean, that was the Bowden thesis, that the system it knows that it can't get rid of that impetus, so it tries to funnel it into well, it's all right as long as it's punch and artsy type thing.
Yeah, look, the other thing I say about Bond is that he is just he's just a total represents hedonistic values. All he cares about is gambling and drinking and banging birds, but he never does anything transcendent outside of that. So that's why he's never a hero.
You are right, Farah, but at the same time, I do think there's something kind of if you were going to hire a man to do what James Bond is meant to do, that's basically who he would be. You do have to be a bit of a quote of he isn't going to be there worrying about his sort of Christian virtue. He's going to go and do he's going to do what he needs to do.
But I guess he's fundamentally materialist, though, and that's always going to be the problem with that kind of character. While maybe the hero has something transcendent as part of their nature as well, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay, let's carry on here. in the interest of time. So
This has been quite the tangent, isn't it?
Yeah.
Londra.
Whoa.
I love this one. So obviously, during gladiatorial arenas, the emperor used to put his thumbs up or thumbs down to the loser to see whether their lives should be spared. And you can see here that the hand of God has declared that London is not fit for purpose and should burn. And so if you can zoom in, you can see Tower Bridge there. But I love this one. My favorite posters.
I mean, I have to say, this may be, I don't know how popular or unpopular this would be, but based on what I know of London now, I'm not saying I want to see any of the ancient architecture destroyed or anything, or even the Victorian stuff. I don't hate that, but based on what London is now and how much I hate having to travel there, there's something quite cathartic about this, I would say. Very sort of Sodom and Gomorrah.
You need to put Siddiq Khan's face in there. I
hate to bring down the tone, but this does remind me of one of my favorite GIFs, which is this one. I love the energy on this guy.
Was it? What is it?
That's a man with his thumb down, kind of fat nerd with his thumb down. Anyway,
I think he realized he was on the screen.
Okay, let's move on. So, this is interesting. Let's have a look.
See, this is just a war widow here. But again, I thought this is really nice. So again, just in terms of the colours and the layout, you've got that kind of striking red background, the widow all in black. So again, it really captures your eyes. The simple single line, but also I like that it's kind of cursive. All the kind of letters joined up together, which is very different in the poster setting. There's something kind of ethereal and ghostly around her, and she's obviously kind of got the little medal of the departed. So again, it's literally. I'm pretty sure it's meant to be like the mothers of soldiers, isn't it? So it's the mothers of potential soldiers. So it's literally appealing to the kind of Italian mummy meme, basically, isn't it?
Mm.
Could also be like a kind of Mike Pence character in drag, though, couldn't it? I mean,
God, come on.
I don't know. There's something. So it looks like it could be an old man dressed up to me. But okay, let's carry on. Let's. Oh my gosh, what's this?
This is a very famous one. This gets used a lot in historical sort of iconography.
Yeah, so I love this. This is another one of Gino's trying to join everyone together. So you can see the Nazi flag, the fascist flag, and the flag of Japan. And Japan here is represented by a gigantic samurai, which is crushing the ships of England and America. If you zoom in, you can see the flags on the ships. And then in the background, you've got the ships of the Axis as well. So 3 Axis ships firing upon, British on the left and then American on the right. But it's kind of representing Japanese naval dominance, because again, I think the Italians weren't particularly good at the Navy. So it's kind of showing this is why we're getting the Japanese involved. Look at the superior Japanese steel that's going to be used to destroy our opponents. But I love just this kind of gigantic samurai. Brazil, there's something kind of like, with the giant samurai scene in that, something of that kind of absurdist, but also where, it's all about the iconography. And
is this a Japanese effort, Farah?
No, this is Gino again. This is Italian.
This is just Italians bigging up their Japanese allies.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
But now, if I was to be a deeply subversive character,
here we go.
You could morph this, couldn't you, by expanding this on the top of his helmet here into a McDonald's archway.
I knew it.
Yeah, you extend that into a McDonald's archway, and you use it as kind of, haha, look at you now, Japan. You're just a kind of another empty globo homo vassal state, another venue for endless cheap American burgers to be flogged to your citizens. Take that. That's true defeat. How about
I mean, you could do that, and I'd agree with the message of it. Yeah.
I mean,
So,
McDonald's obviously isn't out at this time,
maybe,
is it? So,
maybe I'll just subvert all of these posters to make them ashes, to ashify all of the posters. Maybe because nothing so heroic could exist in this age. It's beyond us. So you'd have to turn that into a McDonald's, and that makes it kind of safe for the feminine viewer at home.
Yeah.
And let's move on, shall we?
So that's the last Italian one. Now, if you click on the next, this is actually a PDF that was pulled together by Galahad. So I gave him some posters, and he's done some translations and thematically grouped them. So just want to shout out to him for pulling this together. But if you scroll down, you can see each of the different posters.
Communism is when every single transnational corporation supports your grassroots social movements. Karl Marx. Okay, right.
I like the kind of corporate aesthetic of the cover as well.
Transformation of the Fritzes. These are not wild howling creatures crossing stormy river flow. It is Hitler row by row, pushing all the Fritzes east. Here the widows are all loopholes. Here the business all hide death. Here upon tasting foreign land, the fooled Fritzes into crosses turn. The German bastard's doom is no wizardry at all. It's in fact the Red Army's triumphant fighting skill. Kind of nice poetry, and
exactly.
Look at the skeletal hand, the deathly hand of the painter there. So
yes, so it's kind of like three stages: the soldier, and they're kind of morphing into the in the morph there, the swastika, of course, and then the morphing into the dead man's cross across there. So, but I thought it's cool because it's you've got this poetry element to it, which we haven't really seen so far.
It feels kind of deeper than a lot of the British efforts, which were just like, women get in the factories and grow your own carrots. It's basically the long and short of the Italian and so far the Soviet efforts have felt more, I don't know, connected in some way to real people somehow. I don't know. So let's move on. Working in the rear is like the front. Each ton of bread, coal, oil, steel is a blow to the enemy. So
you can see there's different trucks you can see the coal, oil, and steel, and that's forming a gigantic bullet which is landing on the Allies' head. So again, it's like a clever way of saying, your efforts behind the lines in the factories making a big difference.
Give us more tanks, anti-tank rifles and guns, planes, cannons, mortars, shells, machine guns, rifles.
I mean, there is something kind of, I'd say, as propaganda, this is quite effective given where it is, because of course, they are right in the sense that provided that for every 13 tanks that the Germans could blow up, there'd be a sort of 14th, then the Russians could stay in the war. So I mean, they are basically correct when they say that every ton of bread, coal, oil, steel, that is really helping them win in a very big way. So again, objectively, I think this is a pretty effective poster.
Yeah, and also think back to how bad some of the Russian stuff was last time. I mean, I did really like some of the kind of heroic-y kind of stuff, but in terms of messaging and these kind of more complicated ones, I think the one on the left is very simple and effective. Also, obviously, go on.
It is the reason for the leveling up of propaganda this time round, though, because Stalin had purged the leftist elements in the elites, basically, and he'd enforced his more kind of traditionalist doctrine. So this is all tapping into the kind of stronger foundational elements, because there's kind of less. I mean, it sounds weird to say in literally Soviet Russia, but you could argue that the by this era, they were more kind of tapped into things that might actually motivate people.
Yeah,
I guess.
Well, hold that thought for a second, because there's some interesting stuff coming up in a bit. But I think certainly in terms of ideas, they've learned a lot from the past. They've seen what the Americans and British have done propaganda-wise, and it's really simplified. The art style's gotten massively better, and again, there was a large cultivation of artists who could have working in the kind of graphic space as well. So I think that helped. And then, I think you're right. So on the right hand side here, you can see kind of the idea, this Soviet realism, the kind of heroic man and also woman as well. Notice how she's up there. She's a fighter. She's asking for weaponry as well. So much more connection and much more of this kind of heroic idea. I also love the font on the right hand side. You can see the kind of Porter on the right hand side. It's kind of looks like it's exploding out like the end of like from the barrel of a gun or something like that. So you've got that movement on the poster as well.
For the honor of the wife, for the love of the children, for the happiness of your motherland, for our fields and meadows, kill the invader enemy. I mean,
yeah, very trad, isn't it?
This is like friend good, enemy bad, crush. Stalin knew how to motivate the crowd. I mean, where was all this base stuff in the British propaganda? It was much more kind of womanly and kind of don't gossip basically and grow your own carrots. I mean, where was all this stuff?
I would say if you ever wanted a kind of inkling that the British sort of myth around being minutes away from being crushed, this is the propaganda of a country that is teetering on the brink of collapse at most times, not just as much as I love the kind of low-key British propaganda, even though obviously it was in the service of something very unfortunate, and I'm not a communist either, obviously, but I mean, this stuff I would say is superior, in the sense that it's this is the brutish enemy, and that sentence, for the honor of the wife, for the life of the children, for the happiness of the motherland, it harks back to the most basic ideas around why men go to war. That's I think that's
it's weirdly like some of those First World War posters, isn't it? Where again, it's just kind of like they're raping women in Belgium.
Yeah, I think if I had to pick so far of all the streams we've done, a single favorite image, it would be that one, just because of the way it combines the art with the simple, almost kind of like elliptical, poetic message about why you're in the war. It's not saying let's build more tanks and planes. It's not saying buy bonds. It's not saying women, you need to be in the factories. It's just here is the very basic idea about why any man really is at war.
I mean, I haven't fleshed this out yet, but I've got this idea that socialist nations inevitably must take nationalist turns, as Stalin did famously, but not just Stalin. I mean, if you compare early Mugabe to late Mugabe, for example, early Mugabe was just kind of bog standard Marxist. By obviously he was a terrible person, Mugabe, but he lent in much stronger into a kind of ethno-nationalism late on in his reign. As did I'm just trying to think of some other examples. There's something about late socialism or advanced socialism that then it almost inevitably has to become much more about this sort of thing. I want to say Chavez, early and late Chavez had a bit of this as well. Kind of and this goes into some of those other things we've been talking about, Panama. We were going to talk about it tomorrow, but we'll have to delay it. But the abuses of patriotism type thing. I mean,
yes,
it's a very useful tool.
I know that the whole discussion around nationalism and patriotism got kind of muddled very, very much in other things. It didn't quite go as I was expecting. But I mean, the point I was trying to make fundamentally is that looking at the sort of broad sweep of human history, nationalism and patriotism are revolutionary. They're not reactionary. And it's why, for example, as you point out, Stalin, Castro, Mugabe, they could all use patriotism when they wanted it, because it doesn't really conflict with the sort of Marxist revolutionary ethos. It does if you're sort of an orthodox and you want to say, well, no, Marxism is strictly non-nationalistic. It's not this or that. But I mean, it's the fact is that it's so useful to people in power, which was what my critique of it was. It's so easy for this is my point. It's easy for a Stalin or a Castro or a Robespierre, or even any sort of bog standard Republican administration in the West to just simply use this stuff to get men to die in the millions.
It's also part of that whole Spandrel idea of the bio-Leninism, that once the useful idiots have catapulted you into power, you have to purge the useful idiots, basically. After a while, the dysgenic rot must be, you must replace them with competent people. And it goes into Robert McKell's Iron Law of Oligarchy, where the nature of power is inherently what he calls conservative, by which he doesn't mean conservative values. He means the maintenance of its own power, right? And to maintain your own power, you can't have a bunch of lefty intellectuals in power, right? You must, at some point, get rid of them and replace them with people who are going to get the job done. But they are a useful bulwark to get you into power in the first place. And in the case of Soviet Russia, that's exactly what happened.
Of course.
So anyway, this one on the right, we haven't had a look at. The hour of payback to Germans for all their atrocities approaches. Death to the fascist child killers. And there's a girl here, innocent, blonde, good looking, with a gun in her, basically being shot in the back of the head. I mean, if that's not motivation for the troops, what is?
Again, I think it works really well with the color scheme as well. So because she's got the kind of red and everything's sort of grayscale, your eyes are immediately drawn to her and the kind of innocence. She's sort of looking up and at you at the same time, so you have that kind of moment of sympathy. Then there is this kind of like diagonal line caused by the gun drawing you up to the Nazis. Again, the other bit of red is around the Nazi armbands. So you instantly know who it is. You see their horrific faces. And then I love the background where the smoke from the gun sort of feeds into this kind of swampy background. So just from an art perspective, I think it's really, really well done.
And what interests me about the one on the right is that Hitler and the soldier aren't really dehumanized at all. Like, other than the sort of, I suppose, the sort of, he's looming unrealistically tall there. But other than that, he isn't really made out. It's almost there. I think that the Soviet propagandists are actually very canny in what they're doing, because they're essentially saying that Hitler isn't some like giant leviathan that is going to come and eat everybody. He's just a kind of defeatable monster, or just a defeatable man. He's if we can fight hard enough, we can quite easily kill him. That seems to be the message there.
Oh my God! Look. Libertarians getting owned by commies. We will eradicate the spies and saboteurs of Trotskyist, Burke and his agents of fascism. So, in the warped logic of the Stalinist regime, Trotskyites were fascists. Is that? If you were a supporter of Trotsky, you were an agent of fascism.
It was basically that if you were a Trotskyist, you weren't a Stalinist. So therefore, you may as well be a fascist.
There's some notes that Galahad's given on this as well, and he was saying, interestingly, the swastika. So the one on the left was 2 years before the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. So you can see the swastika in the snake's eyes.
Oh yeah. It's bizarre, though, that they tried to accuse Trotsky of being a fascist. I mean, I suppose it's like, not, but
I mean, if you look at like today, for example, it doesn't matter whether you're just like a sort of like washout, like sort of Ruber type, or whether you're actually like a sort of hardcore, say, you know, an actual Nazi. Like the left will just lump you together. This is the thing. It doesn't matter. All that matters in this style of thinking is that you aren't them. You aren't with them, so you're against them. It doesn't matter to what the level of your objections are. You are an enemy.
Yeah,
that's
and they'll trample over anything. Like, so for example, let's say they've got the issue that the person saying it, okay, is Jewish. Okay, pretty difficult to accuse someone who's Jewish of being a Nazi, right? Doesn't matter. They'll just say, "Oh, you're self-hating.
Yeah, because
you're self-hating."
Because they aren't with the revolution.
They do that to David Horowitz, for example. They just, they'll just say, "Oh, you're a self-hating," or they'll lean into it in the kind of Corbynite way, which is like you're a tool of you're a fascist tool of Zionism or something.
There you go.
So it's kind of interesting how that game is played. But here they are, literally in 1937, accusing Trotsky of being a fascist, which is insane. And here's Stalin, 1939. With a Stalinist spirit, our army and country are strong and tough.
Again, this is channeling that kind of Geno samurai again, this kind of monstrous mecha Stalin sits behind his troops. He's larger than life. Again, it's interesting because they're using some photography there. But again, just that the colors all grayscale apart from the red. You can see the red star across there on the left-hand side, and the huge kind of swathes of tanks and troops. I'm pretty sure there's like just a massive gun on the left-hand side that doesn't look like it looks like it's been like enlarged by photography.
That's a self-propelled cannon. Yeah.
As terrible as Stalin is, right? And he's obviously terrible. There are still some like Chad-like elements that I cannot help but appreciate.
I mean, I was going to ask you your opinion on the whole cult of Stalin thing. I mean, just thinking back to the original, the Top Trump stream. I think you've always kind of held this view, haven't you?
So, well, there are bits that I appreciate, right?
Mm-hmm.
When Stalin gave a speech, he had a little button under the table, and he'd press it for the crowd to clap. And it just reminds me, one of my favorite films is Labyrinth, and there's a moment in it I love where Jareth, the king of the goblins, makes a joke and nobody laughs, and he goes, "Well, laugh," and then all of the goblins nervously laugh.
Yeah.
And I just love the idea of Stalin with that little button, like, "Go on, clap then, peons. Go on, clap. Why aren't you clapping?" Presses his button more. There's something about that which is, from a certain point of view, is quite. It's like you got to respect the hustle.
Yeah.
But obviously he's a terrible tyrant as well.
Well, I mean, I think it's kind of why. I mean, I don't think anybody. I mean, perhaps China as an entity is heading that way, or they already have. But I think just in terms of like one man, I don't think there's anybody in history that had the amount of sheer control over the humans around him that Stalin had. Like you mentioned about the button. He would sit in a meeting with his sort of cabinet, and he would have the button. He would make a point, press the button, they would clap, and then he would press it again, they would stop. It's like what is this level of control that you have?
Also, you've got to respect commissioning films on Ivan the Terrible.
Oh, he loved Ivan the Terrible.
And encouraging people to make the connection. Yeah, that's me. Ivan Terrible, me. That's me, everyone.
I mean,
I'm just like doing it openly,
you actually mentioned on that original stream, and this is something I read as well, that he banned the part 2 of Ivan the Terrible because it didn't make Ivan the Terrible tyrannical enough. He said it made him look too soft, so he banned it.
I shouldn't laugh, but
he is sort of.
I think we're headed. I honestly think we're headed that way. What I mean, obviously it's not as insane as somebody having a bus up, but clap for the NHS at this time.
Well, yeah, this is the thing.
Anyone who's not out,
it'll get to the point where they'll say, well, people are using applause as a tool to show their annoyance at anti-racism measures. So we're going to make it so you can only clap between the following points. Or they did that thing a few years ago, didn't they, where it was like clapping causes people to be anxious. So you have to use what was it, jazz hands instead of clapping.
Yeah. And of course the enforced kneeling at games and all of this sort of stuff. I actually think that the better analogy, though, because there's something machismo about the way Stalin did it, right? But obviously we're in a much more kind of feminine version of it, and I honestly think that the film The Death of Stalin shows where we are closer. And there's something that interests me about that film, The Death of Stalin, which is wonderful in all sorts of ways, especially the links that you can draw between what we're living through and what you can see in that. I've sat in meetings before which not a million miles away from that, the meetings that you see in Death of Stalin. But one of the things that I find baffling is reconciling the writers of that film with their kind of views on Twitter. If you look at Iannucci and the other dude, the toothy fellow, I forget his name.
They're all leftists, aren't they?
They are the worst, kind of most politically correct, awful Remainer kind of. They have all the views you'd expect. So how do they how are they so unself-aware to write that film and then not see it in themselves?
In their mind, the quote unquote like liberalism that they champion is polar opposite to kind of like Stalinism or Hitlerism. So it doesn't matter how we can plainly see that these things are just using each other's methods to control humans and gain power, but they can't see it because they, in their own minds, they're as far away as they can get from that. They're using Stalinist methods to make sure that people aren't racist on the internet. As long as there is that, then they won't ever realize what they're actually doing. And yeah, I mean, I agree. And I thought the same thing when I saw the Death of Stalin and the other stuff he's done. The thick of it. Where it's like he's clearly has a lot of contempt for the Westminster political class, and yet he continues to play the game. I mean,
I can't reconcile. I mean, the thing is that there's a lot of that generation of comedians who seems so intelligent. Like, I mean, Lee and Herring, I mentioned at the start, they are the worst. I mean, they are almost like, I mean, I have had to draw a hard separation between the work and the man. I do that in other fields as well. Like being a wrestling fan, you have to be like, oh, well, this guy was a rapist but beat his wife. It was like, well, okay, but they were still a good wrestler. You can't kind of let those two things. But you have to do it increasingly, because if you had to judge every artist on their politics, there'd be nothing left to watch, basically, at all.
Exactly. And I mean, I don't know if the Death of Stalin would warrant its own stream or not, but it might be interesting. But I used to listen to a podcast. I stopped listening like sort of 2 years ago because it just became too woke and insufferable. But Kermode and Mayo's film review.
I listened to that for many years. Many years.
Same here. It was I used to really enjoy it, but it just went off the deep end. And I remember when that film came out, Armando Iannucci went on there to give an interview about it, and his line was basically that film was made prior to Brexit and Trump happening, but that his take on it now, when it was actually being released in the theaters, was that that we need to take this film as a warning against like Trump and Brexit populism.
Absurd.
Because
Absurd.
that was his take. And of course, Kermode and Mayo were there going,
You sort of mentioned this on UO on Tuesday, that stuff like Brexit and Trump has physically broken people's minds a little bit, and I think that's happened to someone like Armando, because he used to produce pretty good content, and he would have his views, but would sort of keep himself to himself. but then Trump has brought out the worst in people. They have sort of lost their minds, and then that's all flowed into their work. And I think there has been a noticeable decline where, like he's done some other stuff. He directed David Copperfield. And that was a terrible adaptation.
I refuse to see any film that so brazenly does that thing where they cast like ethnic minority actors.
I really like Iannucci. Some of his more obscure works. Like, have you ever watched Time Trumpet?
Yes,
there's some amazing ideas.
The forbidden keys on the piano. That's great.
There's some very, very strange material in there. So, I mean, this is the kind of weird thing. This is the kind of weird thing where I also think, Farah, this is one of the reasons why there's such a hatred of what they call the intellectual dark web. It's like, well, how can there be all these people like me and you who would watch? We're not kind of rednecks, beer guzzling rednecks. We are the sort of people who would watch Time Trumpet, and yet here we are on the evil right. How can that happen? But I see it as a positive sign.
I mean, it must be quite scary to them to know that they can make a film like that thinking, ha ha lol, this is a good, attack on Trump. And then we can sit here and go, yes, this is clearly an examination of the flaws of leftist and Marxist thinking. It's like, I think that's probably quite worrying in a sense.
Yeah, and I think the reason for that is because the kind of powers of deconstruction, which obviously everybody learns in university and so on, it's only a matter of time before the lens is turned on the actual power structures of now. And unless you're a complete retard, you can see that the power structures of now all tend towards a certain worldview. And it's the worldview that all of the elites hold, which happens to be a left-wing one. So, I mean, I don't know what I'll do for Cigars. I might do the whole how power creates its own subversion as a form of containment, doing a deep analysis on that. Did you see that Extinction Rebellion thing where where these kind of very, very, very middle-class women took some hammers to the headquarters of Barclays?
Yeah.
They broke the glass.
Yeah.
This is... I'll probably talk about it tomorrow, but it's just an example of how that is a purely performative thing, and probably if you follow the money, Barclays funded that.
Yeah,
and I just think it's a very interesting phenomena whereby, true power, you have to foster a little bit of your own subversion. Putin does it, and I'm pretty sure that the Soviets would do it as well. The Soviets would actually fund their own protests.
Interesting.
Yeah, they do it in Iran as well, where
so
you get these marches and the government is on both sides.
The famous Bloody Sunday massacre that kicked off the revolution of 1905 in Russia. You heard about that? I mean, that was started by a man who was literally a czarist agent provocateur. It's like I think it is a favorite tool of those in power at certain times to kind of almost weaponize against themselves for their own purposes, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, so anyway, let's move on in the interest of time. I just realized it's 5:10 here. We must move on.
So I like this next section because Gallagher has named it Tradlarping. So again, if you remember on the First World War, there was kind of references to the bogatiers and the kind of heroic medieval knights of Rus. On the left here, I love this one. So you can see this is a reference to Alexander Nevsky, who famously defeated the Teutons. There's a really good, there's a really good Soviet propaganda film that I'd recommend watching. I've actually got I just sent it through a link on private chat of one of the bishops from that film. AA, if you could just bring it up a second, because it's
the link is very interesting, Farah. What is this?
I just found it on Google.
The link is Freemasonry. What is this? Anyway, yes, here we are.
This is one of the Teuton bishops, and you can see his like little
God.
masked swastika on the head there. That if you can see, but anyway, Alexander Nevsky is cool. Check it out.
So let's have a look then at some of the. What does it say? Whoever comes to us by the sword will die by the sword. And then on the right, let us be inspired in this war by the courageous ways of our great ancestors. So here we have Stalin's communist Russia massively leaning into the cultural history of the Russians in a way that would have been unthinkable in like Lenin's time, I would have thought.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, definitely harking back to the Great Patriotic Wars and the previous Great Patriotic Wars. The one against Napoleon and the one against Frederick the Great. This is risky stuff for a Marxist. Certainly, there's and I used to know quite a few sort of very orthodox intellectual type Marxists who, their main kind of criticism of Stalin was kind of the things that we say. The fact that he revived all these kind of trad things that are kind of that aren't really related to Marxism at all. No. They're just useful on their own terms. And also, who did you say put this PDF together, Farrow?
Galahad.
All right, well, shout out to him because this is very good. And I like the little headings as well. It's trad LARPing.
Yeah. Just on that, remember in the First World War Russia stream, the Leninists had a sort of trad one where they had the knight, and the communist knight was like a blacksmith. Do you remember with like a blacksmith hammer? But again, how far away is this? You can see the kind of regal, the regal Prince of Novgorod riding a horse in the background of the poster on the left hand side there. It's a total rejection of the everyman as the hero.
Yeah,
it's very interesting that they lent into this. And next time a commie says, but the Russians won the war, without show them this. Just say, well, how did they do it? Did they do it by quoting Marx and Engels, or did they do it by appealing to deep-rooted tradition and patriotism and so on and so forth? And I think the answer is obvious, isn't it? Oh, look at this one. Let us be inspired in this war by the courageous ways of our great ancestors. So there it is. We will cut off all routes to escape from our evil enemy with a noose. From this one, he cannot break free.
I mean, look, I'm not saying anything about the man they're strangling, but I'm just saying that very cursed alliance between the liberal powers of Britain and the US and the Marxist power of Russia. Just think about it.
I mean, it's almost impossible not to see, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's always been the same. Always been the same. Here is the last one now. Under Lenin's banner, forward for our motherland, for our victory. And there it is. I mean, I do want to do a whole deeper story on Soviet art at one point, and I might bring Mr. D on for it. But I would say the way in which post-death Lenin was kind of lionized and turned into this kind of heroic, almost mythical figure is quite interesting in and of itself. A similar thing is done in Iran, actually, with the Ayatollah Khomeini died in 1989, and for most of the existence of the regime, he's been dead, and it's been Khomeini, but for a long time you wouldn't see the new Ayatollah without the big, powerful ghost of the old Ayatollah.
Yeah,
and Lenin was very much used like that, wasn't he?
He really was. Well, I mean, Stalin's personality cult didn't come from nowhere. He, as you pointed out with the Ayatollah, he would appear next to Lenin whenever he could. After Lenin had died, his name would be mentioned. I believe one of the official names of the Communist Party was the Party of Lenin and Stalin. And that sort of thing. He was seen as he set himself up as Lenin's blood brother.
Yeah, I mean, in wrestling terms, you'd call it a rub. He wanted a rub off Lenin, to get himself over. And then once he was over, he didn't need Lenin anymore. But I believe they post Stalin, doesn't the the Khrushchev, Brezhnev types, doesn't the Khrushchev regime try to like resurrect the image of Lenin to try to help establish the kind of more faceless, kind of bureaucratic post-Stalin Soviet Russia?
They may have done. Or I know that they, Khrushchev in particular kind of took a fairly anti-Stalinist line. He sort of said, look, we have to acknowledge how tyrannical Stalin was now.
They had a whole project called de-Stalinization.
That's right.
I'm pretty sure part of de-Stalinization was a kind of a renewed emphasis on the figure of Lenin. And you actually see, like, one of the things you'll notice on BBC coverage, because let's not forget the BBC is tacitly part of the same intellectual web that erects a statue of Queen Elizabeth and puts the Communist Manifesto as
tacitly,
tacitly, openly, overtly.
Yeah.
But whenever you see BBC coverage of Soviet Russia, they'll always phrase, Stalin is utterly condemned, terrible tyrant. But Lenin is always kind of phrased, well, there are people on both sides of the argument, and the BBC will always kind of dog whistle.
He is George Galloway.
They'll always tacitly dog whistle their support for Lenin in any coverage, and they've been doing it for 50 years now.
The communists and Marxists I knew at school were big lovers of Lenin. They absolutely adored him. Yeah, but they didn't even care about Stalin. They never even mentioned him. It was as if he wasn't, even a Soviet leader. It was just, Lenin all the way. And the thing you have to remember as well is that Soviet communists view the entire Soviet Union as the progress of the revolution. So the whole idea is that they're going to take power, and then the entire time that they're functioning as a state, it's the progress. They're trying to make the revolution happen. So to a lot of them, Stalin was seen as a kind of setback because he almost made it into something of his own image. He brought back all this kind of ancient iconography. He almost like I remember I was reading someone that said that Stalin, had he somehow like magically lived another like 20 years, what if he turned out to be the next sort of like Constantine? What if all of a sudden he just had a big road to Damascus conversion and declared like the new trad Rome in the East? And obviously I'm not saying this is a serious idea. It was only some it was kind of conjecturable, but it was an interesting idea given the way he was headed into where he was thinking.
Well, I remember years ago when I was writing critiques of Marxist thinkers and so on. One of the big guys that everybody's made to read in university is Louis Althusser, and some of his critics like accuse him of being a Stalinist and so on. But I always remember this one line, like Louis Althusser, whose chief criticism of Stalin, like Stalin's main crime, is a perversion of Marxist theory and nothing else. It's like kind of there is this tradition of criticizing Stalin, not necessarily for the gulags and for the millions of people he killed, but rather for like perverting the course of where Marxism was meant to go, essentially on a theoretical basis. So because stuff like this, stuff like what we've looked at, he shouldn't be doing that. He should have been like subverting those traditional Russian tropes and pushing
the new socialist man,
Exactly. All right, I think that'll do. Super chats. I've just realised we have to have a look at some super chats, and then to round things out, I released Foundations of Rhetoric earlier this week, and I thought it would be fun before we end up to get Pharaoh, the advertising analyst extraordinaire, who's analyzed hundreds of adverts on this channel, to analyze to analyze my Rhetoric's advert. Anyway, in the entropy, Thomas Kubit says, "What happened to England after World War I to turn everybody into socialists? Can we see a stream on 1920s in England and London?" Yeah, well, I mean, I think in a nutshell, when you dragoon most of the population to become a government employee and to die for you, it's pretty difficult then to turn around and say, oh well, yeah, now you've died for us, we're not going to do anything for you. So it sets up an expectation that the government were responsible for all sorts of things.
Also, of course, the minute the First World War ended, they gave franchise to pretty much everybody. So, of course, from then on, the march is going to be towards leftism. You've already had that era of kind of Gladstonian liberalism, and so now that you've opened up, you can march on to Marxism, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk more about these sorts of things in my video on Slippery Slope, I guess. I mean, I don't know how many specific examples I'll touch, but I mean, once you expand the franchise, you're already on the road to universal suffrage, which is just a step on the way to socialism, essentially.
Yeah. But isn't your point around the typical person having a sense of entitlement after the First World War a very kind of ground up approach? It seems to me that what you have at the end of the First World War is an annihilation of the lion types in society, and all that's left is the kind of fox types, who've sneakily stayed at home.
Well,
and they've been machinating, preparing their kind of Fabian groups for the moment where the lions fall. Yeah,
you also have to remember though that the warrior elites, who were the kind of the Lord Kitcheners and so on, they suffered a terrible blow to their credibility for the widely perceived errors in their tactics in World War One. So I mean, it reaches us in the form of Blackadder and the kind of the Stephen Fry character, but that doesn't come out of nothing. That comes out of a kind of popular perception that the generals and so on and the admirals badly let down Tommy, who that perception that they just led millions of people, hundreds of thousands of people to essentially suicide and death, didn't kind of destroy the warrior elite caste, if you want, in the British upper echelon. And
I would say that I'm not just going to straight up call it a myth, but that misconception about sort of the generals being stupid and out of date and sending all their men to die pointlessly. I would suggest people look into the recent schools of history around, in particular, Field Marshal Haig, because I think the truth is that it basically wasn't like that. I think it's basically a leftist revisionist myth, and you have to remember that for the sort of 10 years after the war, General Haig was remembered as a war hero. He was remembered as the man that won the war, as opposed to a kind of the evil out of touch old toff. And
who perpetuated it? Who perpetuated that myth? And why is it? It's in the interest of fox elites, doesn't it, to overpower the lions, to essentially undermine them.
That it crushes the idea of that sort of warriorism as a credible way of going. And I mean, it's also worth saying, I think, that it's one of the most pervasive leftist myths that sticks on the right and on the sort of reactionary canon as well. People, I hear people in all circles talk about it. So I mean, yeah, there does need to be, if we're going to talk about the First World War, there does need to be a kind of a different understanding of what actually happened with that idea. The idea that the generals were all idiots. Because it clearly wasn't true.
So let's carry on. Narco Republican says, I mean, that's one of the interesting things that we might look at actually is those, there's the people, there's the merchants, there's the warrior caste, and there's the priests. And it would be interesting to look at who, like, when each one of those was shunted out of power. I want to say the last truly aristocratic prime minister was Douglas Hume, was it? Is he the last kind of true lord?
Only nominally, it's only because he happened to be a lord prior to becoming prime minister. He doesn't really
didn't he
deserve.
take his seat from the Lords?
No,
which
he
would
didn't.
never happen now, right?
No, he didn't. He resigned his peerage so that he could lead from the Commons, which
Right,
tells you
okay.
all you need to know about him.
Right. Okay.
I mean, last aristocratic prime minister, Baldwin comes pretty close in the sort of like very old Tory sense. He was sort of like he liked to play the part of a country gentleman, and he had a very sort of irascible manner. And even though he ultimately continued to oversee the sort of decay of Britain, I still think he was quite a good prime minister on the whole. I would say probably the Marquis of Salisbury, Lord Salisbury, Big Bob.
But it has to because the key thing is not so much were they an aristocrat or not. It is, do you see the running of the country purely in economic terms or not?
Well, I mean, Hume certainly did. I mean, I think there's no doubt about that. He came at a point where he certainly, it was all about the state of the economy and the jobs and the strikes was basically the entire political sphere at that point, and it remained that way for a long time.
Yeah, I mentioned Bowden before. Yeah, he always tells this little anecdote about Hume saying, what about unemployment? I can give you a job in my garden type thing.
Yeah, there's room for a gamekeeper on my estate. Yeah.
Anyway, let's carry on. Narco Republican says Spanish Civil War propaganda next. The commies were very good at that one. The no pass around slogan persists even to this day. I'm actually going to cover the Spanish Civil War on the Cigar Stream because there's this chap who's been running this blog looking at parallels between the sides of the Spanish Civil War and what's happening in society today. And I just thought he'd be an interesting guest to get on. So I don't know when that will happen now.
Do you know what the name of that blog is? Sorry, just because it sounds interesting.
Yeah, it seemed to be behind a paywall, actually. Yeah, it seemed to be behind a paywall. But I'm trying to let me see if I can find that. King. I always have to search my own Twitter handle to try to find things. Yeah, let's have a look. Yeah, it's called Prog Rock Farmer.
Rock Farmer.
It's nicolo.substack.com. It's a Substack. It is. Yeah. Prog Rock Farmer. Anyway, let us carry on with the super chats. Jacob says, where is the Japanese poster where Franklin Roosevelt is a zombie, Frankenstein's monster? That one is just plain funny. So, we didn't actually look at the Japanese side of things, did we, Pharaoh?
Yeah, I had to get translations for it. So,
Jacob says, Trotsky is not being accused of fascism. He is being accused of enabling fascism by splitting socialism and creating the Fourth International. It's calling him a schismatic underminer. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. Years the Eunuch says, again on nationalism, it is a natural, healthy force and shouldn't be stamped out. Powermongers will use these positive forces, such as religion and family values, in pursuit of control. We mustn't eschew being human in the hopes to save it.
Who said that? Sorry.
Yes.
Oh, right. I mean, nationalism stream part 2. I mean, the thing is that I'm trying to make a philosophical critique of nationalism as it came about post French Revolution, and I think that there's still a conflation here between the idea that nationalism is simply the love of your home. I'm trying to get across that the love of one's home goes back far, far before nationalism, and the idea of loving the land around you. This is the idea of, and the other thing is, of course, that I'm not really. We're at the point now where I don't think anything can seriously be done to fight the way things are going. So I'm not interested in founding a nationalist organization to do anything or that sort of thing. Against trying to fight the system, because you'll just be wiped out.
Yes, the Eunuch says, also I have a clear schedule tomorrow evening and could be on the cigar stream again if you like. So I haven't quite figured out what I want to do for tomorrow's cigar stream, because we've had a last minute switch for the scheduled topic. I might do the whole stream on subversion and containment.
Mm-hmm.
Could be a solo little lecture. I don't know yet, though. I need to have a little think about it. But yeah, there's a possible opportunity to do something tomorrow night. And then switching over to the main super chats, we have Zero Kev says, "Rest in peace, Moldbug's wife, Jennifer Colmer." Oh,
his wife died.
Oh, that's very sad.
Yeah,
I heard about this. Yeah, respects to him.
Yeah,
she was only 50.
I know. It's really tragic, actually.
Yeah,
tragic.
I believe it may have been an inherited condition, or something like that. That decreases life expectancy. But yes, very. Obviously, I don't think he's going to watch this, obviously, but condolences to him.
Yeah. Well, you never know. Maybe Moldbug lurks. You never know.
Maybe.
Infernal 460 says, "Keep up the good work." Well, thank you very much. It means so much. EC90 says, "Do you see how these turlyisms just trip off the tongue now, as if they're just second nature?" But because I'm postmodern, I have to draw attention to it, and therefore can't just do it in earnest. This is the eternal Daria condition. What can I do?
That's what I was going to say.
Take me away from this awful place.
That's what I was going to say earlier, when you asked about, why is it that you have to cringe at everything? It's because you are that character, and I think the trouble is you admire that character too much.
Don't know. I've got equal love and loathing for Daria. I mean, even my cry for help was a quote from The Labyrinth just now. She says, "Somebody save me, take me away from this awful place." All she has to do is babysit her brother.
Well, this is the thing. It's the entitlement, isn't it? Get yourself away from these things and read some sort of more heroic characters.
Go back to your room. Play with your toys and your costumes. Forget about the baby. All right, let's carry on.
From Daria to Daddy Pig in one fell swoop.
EC90 says, did German bombs, I mean, even that was a quote from The Labyrinth. EC90 says, did German bombs have a 99.9% survival rate?
I don't imagine they did.
Narco Republican says, I don't know what that's a reference to.
Is that a COVID reference?
Oh, yeah, he's talking about...
yes, yeah.
Sorry, we were talking about that. Narco Republican says, take the money and bake the cake, you bigot. Well, thank you very much, Narco Republican. I'll take that $2. I'll go and buy some self-raising flour. I'll put it into the hands of Mrs. AA, and I'll say, you go and bake the cake for that old woman. Although I think Mrs. AA always defaults to making a lemon drizzle cake for some reason. I don't know why. I don't know why.
Quality cake.
You can make a chocolate one too, but bake me a Victoria sponge, damn you. But no, I mean, I guess yes. Jakanda Plus says, in fact, when it comes to flour, I bought these big Kilner jars. They're very aesthetically pleasing, and I put different types of flour in each one, and then in my best copper plate writing wrote kind of plain flour, corn flour, self-raising flour, and so on and so forth. So, that's in the pantry here. Carter H.
Carrot cake.
Yeah, I've never actually made a carrot cake. I made a banana loaf before.
Those are good.
Carter H says, modern US UK versus China Russia military ad stream. That's interesting.
Yeah, that would be good, actually. Yeah, that'd be really good.
Put that one on the dog. We've basically got Deepest Law planned until like middle of the summer at this point, but that's a good one. I like that one. Put that one down. I mean, we could replace top 10 ads with that, I suppose, but you've been researching top 10 ads, haven't you?
I've got mine already. They're so good. I'm ready.
Escada goal number 1.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
Definitely not.
Spoilers alert. Chris Lucio says, AA, just give in. Give in to the carrot farming utopia that awaits. Why do you refuse such a wonderful gift to yourself, AA? Chris Lucio, AA, do you think that Scott Adams is controlled opposition? I don't trust that he keeps telling us he's a persuasion pro, but totally isn't using it on us. I don't think Scott Adams is controlled opposition. I just think he's a leftist. I mean, he's a leftist, but he openly says that all the time. Who just so happened to be about Trump and gone on the Trump train, basically. The question everybody has to ask themselves, though, is why was it so easy for so many leftists to get on the Trump train?
Good point.
It wasn't really ever a right-wing movement, but I said that at the time.
Yeah.
I just said it was, until it runs to the bitter end, we have to ride it. But I was pointing out the flaws all along, if you remember, as did Charlemagne. We continually said this is still a plebeian, populist, essentially left-wing movement. We even said that at the time. Time Stealer says Panama was talking about night fighters used in the Battle of Britain, twin-engine fighters with a radar in the nose.
Yeah,
there was a night fighter ace called Cat's Eye Cunningham who ate a lot of carrots. So there we go. Amazing detailed knowledge from our resident steam train expert.
There you go.
Ian Inkster says, AA, where can I send materials for the Ashes? The best place is on Twitter, Ian Inkster. King of Sugar is my handle, and that's the best place. And usually what happens is that somebody will send me something that lights off a kind of spark. So for that training, for the training videos, somebody sent me like one, and I was like, I smell an Ashes coming on, and it led to that. So that's where you can send me those. In fact, my brother is responsible for at least half of the Ashes episodes because he sends me videos, like that Quentin Crisp one. He was like, "You have to see this. This is John D." I was like, "Okay, I'll watch this." Harrison Wade says, a very good source of Ashes material is the show World in Action, which also has one of the best theme tunes of all time. Have you heard the World in Action theme tune? Amazing. Harrison Wade says time for £5. What's that a reference to?
It's
time
5:39.
EC90 says, is Xi Jinping a heroic Chad?
No.
He's just kind of a bureaucrat, isn't he?
Yeah,
all of the boring Chinese leaders are kind of faceless bureaucrats.
Machiavellian type, I would think.
Yeah, definitely Fox.
Mm-hmm.
He's inherently a fox type. I mean, he even looks like a fox.
So, I mean, just one question about him out there in China. I mean, is there kind of a cult around him, or is it just around his party?
Would you trust this man? Fox.
I mean, I hope this won't get the stream taken down or anything. But I would say on the whole, I wouldn't trust Chinese in general. That would be the first mark against him, I think, in my book.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there is a bit of a cult of personality around Xi, and he is meant to be kind of slightly more traditionalist than the line has been, since Deng. He's brought back a few kind of Chinese traditions, and Confucius has kind of come back into the syllabus and stuff. I could be wrong about this, but I believe that he is a bit more nationalist.
Yes, in fact, there's getting some echo. I can hear my own awful voice somewhere.
I will isolate.
All right, I think that's better. I think it's a Jonathan Bowden lecture, or perhaps one of his essays, in which he talks about how I think it is, how China is has brought back all this kind of, no, it isn't Bowden. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Has brought back all this kind of Confucianism into itself, because I think the leaders of China are canny enough to realize that, they're not really that attached to like orthodox Marxism. It's just like, well, we're going to do what we need to do to maintain our power, maintain our sort of hegemony, maintain our sort of wholeness as a group, as a polity. And I think they realized that kind of Confucian conservatism, which is kind of a the Asian reactionary credo, Confucianism. So I mean, I think that's why they're so keen to bring a lot of that back. I don't really think that China is a danger because it's communist. It's a danger because it's not a danger to like really people like us. It's a danger to the Western elites because it doesn't suffer fools really. It's so objectively canny in how it plays its games. It's willing to do whatever it needs to do to construct a society that isn't just going to fall prey to the horrible things in the West.
Utterly ruthless, I would suggest.
Yes, absolutely ruthless.
The reason to distrust the Chinese is not because of socialism. It's because of they're just a foreign enemy, essentially.
Yes, that is true.
A classic foreign adversary, I guess.
They are working their way up to taking on the Western powers, or just watching as the Western powers collapse into themselves, which seems more likely at this point.
Yeah. There's an interesting subset of reactionaries. I mentioned Spandrel earlier, who's famous for the Bio-Leninism essay, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a weird kind of pro-Chinese element, and Spandrel's probably the most prominent example. I can't remember what they call it. It's like Sinophilism or something. But they actually have this idea that the Chinese are ahead of the game, that their kind of lack of respect for democracy is base type thing, and it's actually like they're showing the way to go. I'm not sure about that. That instinctually I find that not the right way to go, to start lauding the Chinese.
I would say in a very, very long-term sense, there is always that hope, I think, that at least from a kind of authentically reactionary position, that societies like China are kind of like this sort of the only hope in a world completely taken over by, liberal capitalism, that China may eventually morph into like the sort of rebirth of the pre-liberal state, of the pre-liberal time, in some way they will kind of that somehow the maxims of living that existed pretty much universally prior to the coming of the liberal age may be somehow reapplied in a country like China, because, as I said, it's so objective in how it sort of uses its policy. It's interested in the integrity of itself, and therefore I think is more inclined to bring back a lot of traditional things. But again, I am not a Sinophile. I don't have any particular like for China, and I've already said my position on the Chinese. So
I would suggest that what's happening in China, you have to understand, because it's a separate civilization.
Yeah,
everything it does is going to have quote Chinese characteristics, and there's just no way that Western countries, Western populations will be able to be funneled into that way of being, because everybody cringes a bit at the term collectivism now because of its association with the early anti-SJWs or whatever. But there is a genuine sense in which the kind of collectivism you get in China is just completely foreign to European modes, let's just say. I mean, even we talked earlier about the fascists and the in the mid-century Germans. Even that form of collectivism didn't manifest itself in the kind of way it does in China, right?
Yeah,
would you agree with that?
Yeah, I've got a story about that. I went to a university which has a high Asian percentage, and basically the Chinese students would club together and basically send one student to a lecture to see the lecture, write down the notes, and then they would have a meeting together where the student would teach everyone else. So they would act as a collective unit working through the course. Yeah.
Hilarious. Yeah. I mean, I know standards of copying are completely different in China and in the West as well. It's a big problem for many institutions. Is like, how are they going to stop the Chinese students just copying or replicating coursework? Or
I mean, the culture around the exams in China. This is sort of off topic, but I do like that the ancient Confucian civil service exam that kind of would make or break your career was like you would study for years, then you would go to like this massive castle that was full of like little cells, literally cells, and you'd bring like some food and some water and your paper, and you would go in and sit down and spend 3 days in this cell writing the essays and doing the exam, and then you would come out and and it would be marked, and they had a really advanced sort of marking system that your name would be scratched off the paper, then it would be re-added later so that the markers couldn't be biased towards or against particular people. It's extremely tough set of exams, and I've always kind of admired that. I almost wish we had something like it in the West. Like 3-day long exam where you're just rotting in a cell.
Yeah. Interestingly, while we're on this subject, and we're going to talk about foundations of rhetoric in a moment. One of the examples I look at is when the Chinese have prisoners of war, like whether American or Vietnamese or whoever else. Famously, they made those prisoners do essays. They'd force them to write like anti-American Marxist critiques, basically.
Yeah.
That's kind of interesting because what they were trying to do is foster what they call inner commitment, and they got this idea that if you write down, if you write the essay, you have to then kind of own it internally, and the more you do it, the more you will kind of identify with those ideas. And it just got me thinking, like, that is very interesting, isn't it? Because if you think about the experience of going to a British university or an American university, they make you write lots and lots of Marxist essays.
It's
interesting,
again, it's the power of culture on your personality. And again, today most people are conditioned to, and hear that watching a film or reading a book doesn't change you. But again, the medieval perspective is that it does. We did a really good stream. Semiagog did a really good stream that I was lucky to be a part of with John Dee on aesthetics. And one of the things we covered is the medieval perception of things like books is that they are dangerous and they can affect your habits. So, for example, in Dante, they had a couple whose affair was started from them both reading a medieval romance together. So the book kind of moving them to take part in this adulterous affair. So
yeah, because if the fictional characters do it, it makes it all right.
Where was that stream with Semiagog?
It's a while ago. I'll send it around on Twitter after.
Yeah, I'd be interested to watch that. I struggle. There's a lot of good stuff on at the moment, so I struggle to watch everything. But I do. That sounds very interesting, and I may have to do some cooking in a minute. And I like to watch, listen to stuff while I'm mashing, peeling carrots and mashing potatoes and so on. Okay, let us carry on because we're running a bit short on time now. Narco Republican, Shergar good, carrot bad. I'm not against carrots. I'm just, I prefer to trade my small portion of my time for a carrot rather than plant it myself. Dawn Browning just given a little okay symbol with 20 Australian dollars. Thank you very much, Dawn Browning. It means so much. Ian Giadan Sivo says, if you read Zhukov's memoirs, you discover that he was devoutly Orthodox and had his children baptized. The only man who could talk back to Stalin. Imagine if he had succeeded him instead of Khrushchev. Yeah, interesting to
second Constantine, almost,
Yep. Harrison Wade says time was a speed run reference. Thank you for the course. Well, Harrison Wade is an avid fan of the academic agency and is very often the very first person to go through the course, and he finds any typo basically He found that I'd made a typo in one of the slides, which I have now rectified. So thank you very much for that. He's like what do they call it? Early release bug tester, patch man. Like, what do they call them in game? Tester, is it? Is that what they call it in gaming? The first person who plays a game.
QA. QA. Quality
Is it?
assurance.
Yeah. It was a tester, maybe. But RCW says, "Is there any link between the fall of the Berlin Wall and the rise of China? A new project?" No, I think the rise of China it goes directly to Kissinger and Nixon and that deal they made in the early 70s there.
Big mistake.
The famous trip that Nixon made to China, which Kissinger. I mean, is Kissinger still alive? He's still alive, isn't he? But he still boasts about it as the proudest moment of his life, basically, where, look at the meeting of these two great civilizations type thing. But I mean, Kissinger, despite his obvious evil, is still somebody worth reading. One of my early videos on this channel was called Realpolitik, supporting dictators. And it was basically just like Kissinger doctrine as foreign policy. Foreign policy is an area I don't talk about that much, but it cannot be ignored. And you have to understand that is an ultimate Machiavellian space as well. So even though Kissinger's evil, I would still read him to truly understand what's going on, like what the real play is a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Although I've got my own criticisms of the Kissinger doctrine. Like, I mean, if you're going to do it properly. Things like, cucking out on properly conquering Korea and so on is just stupid. This is the problem with the neocon. Like, if you're going to neocon, do it all the way. Instead they end up leaving these messes everywhere. I mean, maybe that's by design as well. But if you're going to do in my view, if you're going to do Iraq properly go in and just take it as territory. If you're going to have an empire, run it like an empire. Don't dress it up in all this American exceptionalism bollocks. So that's my criticism of Kissinger, really, from his own side. Ian Giardo Sivo says, Puai, the last Qing emperor, was captured by the communists and converted and died as a gardener in the Forbidden City. He was educated by a Scottish reactionary to be an absolutist. A tragic character. Sounds fascinating.
Yeah, it's a Qing, but by the way, not Qing.
Okay.
The Q is CH. Yes, Puyi was. That is true. His life is actually an amazing story. How he went from the sort of 2-year-old emperor of China to an aged sort of communist controlled man in Beijing. I mean, and also by the way, if you haven't seen it, there's a brilliant film called The Last Emperor with Peter O'Toole playing the character of Reginald Johnston, who was the Scottish reactionary there. Very, very interesting story.
Yeah, and I've missed a few super chats earlier on. Infernal 460 says, "Keep up the good work." Jakanda Plus or Jacaranda Plus said, "Would you be interested in doing a State of Australia stream? If so, the TikToker known as Foreskin Protector should be brought on." Giacanda Plus, with respect, I am not having somebody called Foreskin Protector on my channel.
Bloody hell.
Also, TikToker. Finally, when are we going to get AA on TikTok? That's the real question.
I am not having some TikTok OnlyFans style scumbag on here. Set up a proper channel with a proper name, Foreskin Protector. I mean,
AA.
Yeah.
Ask me if I'm a truck.
Are you a truck?
Hong Kong.
Honk. At least we've given that a new meaning now, because now, of course, truck in these circles means a truck from Thomas the Tank.
That's true.
Thomas and Friends.
Yeah,
truck.
we've reclaimed truck.
We claimed it for the forces of whatever we stand for. All right, so just to wrap up here, I said I wanted to do a breakdown of Foundations of Rhetoric advert. Are you ready for this, Pharaoh?
Yeah.
Okay. We've run a bit late, but let's do it. Okay, so here it is. Here it is. Are you ready for this? Have you seen this yet, Panama?
I have not seen this.
Okay, brace yourself. You may want to say pause at any time you want to pause it, Pharaoh. Okay. Friends, Romans, countrymen, shh, come this way. Lend me your ears. Secrets of ancient rhetoric can now be yours for a trifling sum. The arse of way.
So you got the classic reference to Shakespeare already with the Friends Romans, and then you got the kind of secret element to it. So again, it's kind of like that hidden thing, and also for the trifling sum, only a few pounds. So you're kind of really working your nodes.
Yeah, there was the node of scarcity. That was there was
forbidden
the node,
knowledge.
Yeah, that's the scarcity node again.
Yeah.
The use of Shakespeare was an appeal to authority, hidden one, and a kind of the idea that people might feel like more cultured type thing, and then yes, and then I've snuck Trump in here early because I had the idea that some people might like Trump in the audience, and so I could be using the node of liking, as it's called. People like, trying to get a rub, Anyway, should we carry on, Pharaoh?
Yep.
Persuasive argument is all around us. In fact, we are surrounded by it. We live in a rhetorical age, but this is seldom taught. Can I just say, I'll just say myself, JFK was probably a master of rhetoric, because so often the only example I could find of something was JFK. Like, he literally used them all. His alliteration is insane. The amount of times that he uses these tricks, it's just like, so I've got this idea that JFK studied classical rhetoric because there's just too many of them, or a speechwriter did or something. But,
he was a very good speaker.
And even more seldom explained. It is not for you to know, they said. The master of grammar knows how to write with clarity, precision, and correctness. The master of logic knows how to disarm his opponents with reason alone.
Can you stop here a second? I mean, this is the worst picture in the entire video for me. Weird Slav playing chess with wine. Such a weird video. Like,
it looks like they're in sort of a homosexual prison. That's what this looks like.
The reason is because I wanted to make it believable that the master of logic could be beaten. So I thought, if I make this guy the master of logic, then it won't be such a shame when he's defeated at the end.
I don't know.
So I didn't want to set up the master of logic as being like a heroic figure. I wanted to make him this kind of weird GTA, kind of sub GTA character. So anyway.
Talk about homoerotic subtext, Look at this.
And both can be powerful adversaries. But the master of rhetoric can outflank both, caring as he does little for their rules and even less for
Hold on a second.
Yeah.
AOC in your master of rhetoric? Are you kidding me? I just noticed it now. Oh, no.
What's she good at? She appeals to rhetoric. She only ever appeals to emotion.
It's because she's working for an organization that wants to promote her. It's not because she's got any skill or talent. She's a waitress.
Look at those hands there. Weak hands. They're folded in. Her body posture is weak.
She can't even do the cradle.
Sad eyes.
She looks like the fish from Shark Tale.
She relies a lot on the node of she basically, people like women with big eyes, right? And I think she just relies on that quite a lot.
I think you're going to go somewhere different with her.
Their defeated tears. The master of grammar asks, is this sentence correct? Is this sentence clear? The master of rhetoric wonders, does my speech have the power to sway the passions? Can my words move the crowd? Yes, it can. Yes, it can. The master.
I just want to say, I love that line. I thought that was really good. So that was nice. Nice little bit of copywriting there.
Weirdly, Obama does not actually crop up that often in the. That surprised me a
He's
little
okay.
bit.
He's okay. I don't think he's that good.
I think
I thought-
his I mean at the time when he was in power, I actually studied ironically, given how bad I am at it now, but I studied public speaking and rhetoric, and he was always brought up as an example of somebody who didn't actually really use it at all. He wasn't really a good speaker, but he said the right things. Basically, he hit the correct talking points as opposed to using kind of personal flair.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that in that 2008 campaign, he tapped into the idea of hope quite well.
Yes,
Remember it being quite a hopeful period. But the thing is, with any Democrat, the media kind of helps and gives a lot of what is called social proof to the candidate in a way that someone like Trump will never enjoy. If that makes any sense. But anyway, let's carry on. Of logic trains his mind to eliminate fallacies and formulate correct and well-defined arguments.
same clip twice.
The master of rhetoric knows that the reasoning mind can be flooded with emotions, that the flood can short-circuit logic and overwhelm his opponent, who will crumple. They will wonder why they're... Now, Farrell, I have to mention here, there's quite a lot of Tony Blair in one of the lectures, and you are the main purpose, the main reason that there was this massive injection of Blair into the course.
He's so good though. He's like he's just so evilly good.
He is like, I mean, literally every trick in the book.
Yeah,
Blair does, and sometimes just the same line. He's tapping on like 5 different persuasion nodes all in one. It's just such a snake. It's incredible, really. Yeah. Their well-written, well-reasoned arguments were so defenseless against the rhetor's apparent ability to bend reality to his will. Do the faces in the crowd not see through this dark magic? No, I know this is awful stuff.
Bloody hell!
right. There's so many good
Talking about
faces.
trucks. Trucks.
Look at top left. He looks like top left's great, but also bottom right. Yeah, it's great.
I wanted to find
soy face.
I wanted to find ultimate trucks, and I was looking like so many different crowds. I was like, I found my disgusting crowd.
I have to say, that March of the Never-Ending Trucks, I've been rewatching it about once a day just because it makes me laugh. It's just the way they all just like run at the camera, loop round.
I had an idea. I did have an idea of trying to use that, but unfortunately, the clip is a bit short for what I wanted.
You could have like given it like a sort of dramatic slow motion sort of as all the trucks come, waving into view.
Yeah, so if you actually listen to what is being said by the master of rhetoric here, there's another classic kind of, it sounds profound, right? The stuff being said, but it's just like mentioning Socrates and mentioning like various other writers and things, but it's just like nothing is being said, and yet it's there's a kind of anyway. Let's carry on. The master of rhetoric laughed at their wonder. He looked at the bemused, despairing face of the master of logic and spoke. Harness that wonder, my friend. It was your own beloved Socrates who said, the only true wisdom is in knowing that you know nothing. And wonder is the beginning of wisdom. He turned to the master of grammar. So lucid and correct your prose. But why does nobody listen to you? It was your own favorite. Look at the face of this guy.
You're really holding on this, aren't you?
Yeah, because this is ultimately who you need to persuade. And what's about to be said here is that rather than lamenting this fact, what you have to do, and rather than saying, oh, why can't they think for themselves, you have to just say, yes, this is who they are. It is their nature. They are little more than cattle, and it is going to be up to me to take control of these using the powers of persuasion and whatever else. That's the difference between somebody who's prepared to take it and the weasel master of logic on the side just kind of crying into his the fact that nobody's listening to him, basically.
Yeah.
George Orwell, who wrote, feelings don't care about your fact at the end of the
Exactly.
day. Perhaps a lunatic was simply a majority of one. Do not rail at the crowd for what is in their nature. Understand what they are, and they will listen to you. And with that, the master of rhetoric was gone. Find out what else he has to say by signing up to Foundations of Rhetoric. Fulfill your destiny and complete the trivium.
Yeah, and again, that's a great
Not bad.
tagline at the end as well. Yeah, really good.
Jordan
Top
Peterson
quality.
video next suggested.
Yeah,
Of course.
So there we are. I wanted to make a video completely devoid of actual information as well, just purely relying on rhetoric. So yeah, there we go. Anything you want to shell before we get out of here, Panama Hat?
Oh, of course not. Don't shill.
Farah?
yeah. I created that John Ruskin against the division of labour. It's a bit of a clickbaity title because he's not really against it. He has a more nuanced view than the full carrot pill. But it's I'm not even advocating his views. It's just an interesting point and worth taking a watch. I think the link's in the description, so check it out.
Yeah, I was going to say that I did that video reaction thing on AA Gold.
Yeah.
If I ever do another one of them, I'll stick that on the docket.
Nice.
That will be one of the ones I review. So
Any chance of a sort of Harold Pinter stream at all, or perhaps a sort of mid-century British drama?
Yeah,
stream?
I mean, we may have to because we have scheduled Deepest Law up until like June at this point.
Yeah,
you'll have to like get it in the schedule, and then
that's fair enough. Mr. D is quite keen on us just doing a sort of like read through of the entire play. get the birthday party or something. Get people to.
Yeah, that stream, by the way, that Farah mentioned, I've just seen it. It's called Aesthetics as Moral Guidance, and it's on Semiagog's channel from a couple of weeks ago. But I mean, maybe a couple of scenes. Maybe you can do some dramatic readings, which we can play during it. If it's going to truly be Pinteresque, it has to have a lot of
pauses.
Yes.
Uncomfortable, long pauses. Yeah. Also, obviously, Trivium is complete. You can pick that up now. If you buy all three of them together, if you work it out, you pay significantly less than if you buy them each individually. And people are telling me to mention the merch store as well. I should like to say that my friend Morcar has bought that, so I have nothing to do with the running of the merch store anymore. But you can still get Out mugs and Unpopular Opinions mugs on that merch store if you want. And I think that's it. I think yes, tomorrow is Cigar Stream. Get Out. You see, did you notice how I went up at the end? Because there's a section where I talk about delivery on the course and how you deliver, where you inflect, they call it inflection, right?
Yes.
Get out. If I phrase it as a question, you're like, oh, I'm not sure. Wherever if I say get out, it's more of a kind of command. So get out, everyone. Just get out.